Tonight, we're uncovering ancient Sinnoh, the lost world before Diamond and Pearl. There are a few important threads to follow, but I'll keep the pacing soft so you can still drift off comfortably. Thank you to those of you who've been joining us consistently. If you're falling asleep with us tonight, let me know in the comments how many nights in a row you've been here. And if this is your first night, just comment night 1. Now back to the video. Before there was a region called Sinnoh, before its lakes had familiar names, and its mountains were crossed by trainers, there was only an empty void. From that silence came an egg, and from that egg came Arceus. The old myths describe Arceus as a being with 1,000 arms, though not necessarily arms in the ordinary sense. They may have been rays of power, or ways of shaping a world too vast for human language. With that power, Arceus brought forth the great forces that would hold reality together. Dialga became the keeper of time, Palkia became the keeper of space. Giratina was cast into a strange, shadowed domain, apart from the ordinary world. Then came the lake spirits, Uxie, the source of knowledge, Mesprit, the source of emotion, Azelf, the source of willpower. Their presence would one day be felt in the quiet waters of 3 distant lakes. But at first, there were no shores for them to watch over. Arceus shaped Mount Coronet before the rest of the land. The mountain rose like a pillar at the center of the newborn world, dividing the land to east and west. Around it grew forests, rivers, cliffs, frozen coasts, and volcanic places where the earth still seemed to remember its first moments. This was Hisui, the ancient name of the land now known as Sinnoh. In time, people came to live beneath Mount Coronet's immense shadow. The earliest known people were called the Celestica. Their settlements are gone now, worn down into stone ruins and half-forgotten carvings, but their memory lingers in old places such as Celestic Town. They lived closer to the mysteries of Hisui than later generations did. They knew that Pokémon were not simply creatures to be captured or commanded. They were neighbors, guardians, dangers, and sometimes, beings touched by the divine. Yet even in a land born from sacred power, peace did not always last. The old stories speak of a period when lightning struck without warning, and noble Pokémon became frenzied and fearful. Across Hisui, the balance between people and Pokémon began to tremble. During that unsettled age, an ancient hero set out across the region. This hero gathered all 18 of Arceus's plates, each one carrying the essence of a different type of Pokémon. Along the way, the hero formed bonds with 10 remarkable Pokémon. These companions would be remembered as the ancestors of Hisui's noble and ride Pokémon, protectors honored by the people who came after them. The journey led upward, always upward, toward Mount Coronet. There, beneath the great mountain and the open sky, the hero encountered the being called Almighty Sinnoh. That name carried a mystery which would shape the region for centuries. To some, Almighty Sinnoh was the master of time. To others, it was the master of space. But behind the name, beyond the limits of either belief, stood Arceus itself, the creator whose presence had been felt in the land from its very beginning. The hero earned Arceus's respect and received its blessing, but peace in Hisui was never a simple thing. Another unknowable presence emerged from a domain described as a place of no place, a realm beyond the ordinary shape of the world. After a final trial, the darkness returned to its distant domain, and the mountain fell quiet again. High upon Mount Coronet, the Temple of Sinnoh would later stand in memory of that ancient hero, the hero's Pokémon, and the creator who had watched over the first land. Hisui did not remain Hisui forever. The Diamond Clan looked to Dialga and saw Almighty Sinnoh in the flow of time. The Pearl Clan looked to Palkia and saw Almighty Sinnoh in the vastness of space. Their disagreement was old, but it was also born from reverence. Both clans were trying to understand the same immeasurable power from different sides of the mountain. When the name Sinnoh eventually took hold, it carried the memory of that shared devotion. It was a name that could belong to both clans, and to the land itself, a land older than kingdoms, older than roads, and older than the stories most people still remember. If you have ever traveled through the Sinnoh region in the modern games, you know its comforts. The warm glow of a Poké Center, the predictable challenge of a gym battle, the familiar rhythm of tall grass and trainer battles. This is the Sinnoh that exists on the surface. It is a complete world, polished and orderly. But if you listen closely to the soundtrack, there is a melancholy there, a cold wind. The region carries a memory of a time before it was comfortable. That time was the era of Hisui. The very air was different then. The snowstorms were more brutal. The forests were deeper and darker. And the name Sinnoh itself had not yet been spoken. It was a land without a single ruler, without a league, without the safety of walls. It was a frontier where every river, every mountain pass, every patch of grass could hold a spirit, a powerful, untamable Pokémon spirit. How did a frontier become a state? How did Hisui become Sinnoh? It happened through the slow power of faith. The people who lived in Hisui, the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan, did not worship the land itself. They worshipped the forces that created it. They looked to the sky and saw the passage of time and the expansion of space. They called this vast, unknowable presence Almighty Sinnoh. When the world beyond finally recognized the region, it could not be called by the name of just one clan. So they named it after the one thing everyone could agree on, the divine presence they all felt. They named it Sinnoh, and presiding over all of this, witnessing every shift from Hisui to Sinnoh, from chaos to structure, is Mount Coronet. It is the mountain at the center of the world. In the ancient texts, it is the first thing built, a pillar to hold reality in place. It is the meeting place of time and space. It is the roof of the world in this region. Its peak is where the Temple of Sinnoh stands, a monument to the hero who first united the people and the Pokémon. The mountain is the constant, the one thing that does not change, no matter what name the land carries. But a mountain does not tell its own story. The people who believed in the mountain, who carved their history into its stone, they are the ones who hold the memory. Before the Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan, there was another group, the Celestica. They lived in the shadow of the mountain for generations. They built Celestic Town. They carved the ancient runes that researchers are still deciphering today, and then they vanished. They left behind a world of questions, a world of empty temples and silent graves. And it is their silence that speaks the loudest about the true nature of ancient Sinnoh. Their ruins are not merely old, they are warnings. In Celestic Town, the paintings on the walls show three beings born from a single god, Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. Time, space, and the shadow that exists beyond both. To later generations, these images became mythology. To the Celestica, they may have been history. They understood something that the people of Hisui had only begun to grasp. The world was not stable. It could be broken. It could be remade. At the summit of Mount Coronet, the boundary between the ordinary world and the divine was thin enough to tear. The Celestica built shrines, raised stone monuments, and passed down stories designed to keep that boundary respected, not conquered. Respected, then came the disaster, remembered as the Great Calamity. A rift opened in the sky above Hisui. Space and time twisted. Noble Pokémon became frenzied. The clans looked upward and saw judgment. But the ancient stories suggest that this was not the first time humanity had stood beneath an impossible sky. The Celestica had already known that gods could touch the world directly, and that people could survive only by learning humility. One of their final descendants was Cogita, the keeper of old knowledge. She spoke of a people who lived long ago and then disappeared from the land, not defeated in a great battle, not erased by a single monster, simply gone, leaving their wisdom scattered among ruins. Perhaps they departed because Hisui changed around them. Perhaps they saw that their age was ending, Or perhaps the Celestica never truly vanished at all. Perhaps their beliefs became the foundation beneath every later belief in Sinnoh. The Diamond Clan inherited reverence for the power that governed time. The Pearl Clan inherited reverence for the power that shaped space. Neither clan fully understood the other, because neither could see the complete design alone. Their conflict was not just about names, it was about the oldest question in the region. Is the world defined by the moments that pass, or by the vastness in which those moments exist? The answer was waiting above them, on Mount Coronet, where both forces had always met. What if the very stone of Mount Coronet was formed before the concept of time itself had a name? Before there was a past or a future, there was simply a presence. The land was called Hisui, a name that speaks of a time before modern comforts, before the region was unified under the banner of Sinnoh. But the name Hisui itself is just a veil over an even deeper, older silence. To truly understand it, you have to look past the clans, past the ruins of the Celestica. You have to ask what the ground was like before the very first footprint ever disturbed the soil. We have to travel back beyond human memory, back before towns, before roots, before the idea of a Pokémon trainer was even a flicker in the mind of the world. The Pokémon you know today, the battles, the badges, the bustling cities of modern Sinnoh, none of that casts even a shadow this far back. This is the layer of history that has no recorded annals, only scattered whispers in ancient carvings and the strange geometry of the land itself. Before time had a name, before the rhythm of day and night had been established, there was simply the endless, an expanse so pure in its emptiness that it defied description. There was no light to see by, no air to carry sound, no ground to stand upon. It was a void in the truest sense of the word. No stars, no worlds, no witness, just an absolute and silent nothing. And into this void, an egg came into being. It did not fall from somewhere else. It was not laid by a parent or shaped by an external force. It simply emerged, a single point of existence breaking the perfect symmetry of the nothingness. There was no sound as it appeared, no witness to mark the occasion. It simply was. From that egg came Arceus, the being history would later call the original one. The story of Hisui does not begin with a village. It does not begin with a clan dispute or a hero rising to meet a crisis. The world of Hisui begins not with civilization, but with a solitary god in darkness. The first consciousness to ever exist in this universe, drifting through the very void it had just emerged from. Arceus opened its eyes, and there was light. But even light cannot fill an infinite void alone. Arceus was alone, and so it began to create. First, it brought forth three beings, each designed to give structure to the formless. Dialga was given dominion over time, becoming the flow of moments, the rhythm of existence itself. Palkia was given the realm of space, the fabric of distances, the shape of everything that could hold a position in the universe. And Giratina was born from the antimatter, the necessary shadow that must exist to balance any light. But its nature was too volatile, too disruptive to the harmony of time and space. So a separate realm was set aside for it, the distortion world, a place without consistent direction or dimension, where Giratina could exist as a sovereign of its own broken dimension, keeping the antimatter safely contained. But a universe of just time and space is empty. It lacks heart. It lacks will. So Arceus reached deeper into its own being and created three spirits of pure consciousness. Uxie, the being of knowledge, Azelf, the embodiment of willpower, and Mesprit, the source of emotion. They were placed into three lakes across the land that would one day be known as Lake Acuity, Lake Valor, and Lake Verity, not merely as guardians, but as anchors for the soul of the world itself. Without them, life would have no memory, no drive, no feeling. With the cosmic framework established, Arceus turned its attention to the physical world. It reached out with its 1,000 arms and pulled the land upward. The great mountain chain we call Mount Coronet rose from the ancient sea, splitting the continent into its eastern and western halves. This was not just a landmark. This was the axis of reality in this corner of the world, the point where the raw energies of time and space converged and held steady. Every river that carves through the canyons, every valley that shelters a hidden meadow, is a consequence of that singular act. Into the stone and earth of the new world, Arceus embedded fragments of its own essence, the adamant crystal, humming with the resonance of time, the lustrous globe, singing with the frequencies of space, the griseous core, an anchor tethering the real world to the distortion world beyond, and the 18 plates, fragments of the original one's power, attuned to every fundamental type of energy that would ever exist in the Pokémon world. These were scattered like seeds across the land, waiting beneath the soil and within the mountains. When the act of creation was complete, Arceus withdrew. The legendary Pokémon took their places. The world was formed, stunning and new, but utterly silent. No human voice had yet echoed through the caverns of Coronet. No foot had yet disturbed the shores of the 3 lakes. The creatures that would become Pokémon roamed freely, untamed by any master. The mountains stood in perfect patience. It is impossible to know how long this perfect silence lasted. Time itself was young, and no human mind had yet been born to measure its passing. But eventually, that ancient stillness was disturbed. The first people arrived on the shores of Hisui. They looked upon the peak of Mount Coronet and recognized they were standing on ground that breathed with a divine presence. They found the plates scattered by Arceus and understood these stones were fragments of a greater whole. They gave names to the lakes, sensing the spirits dwelling within the waters. They built their homes in the valleys and carved their understanding of the world into the walls of caves. They were the Celestica, the first civilization to call this land home. Their story is the echo that followed the creation, and the clues they left behind form the next layer of the long, quiet memory of ancient Sinnoh. From the silence of the void, the egg that birthed Arceus had rested without witness. But all eggs must hatch, and when this one did, what emerged was not a shape we could easily comprehend. There was no sound, no crack of shell, only a presence expanding into emptiness. The being that stepped out into the nothing did not use hands of flesh and bone. Arceus shapes existence through the image of 1,000 unseen arms. These are not limbs in the way we understand them. They are extensions of will, threads of pure intent that reach into the emptiness and begin to pull. With every motion, the fabric of reality is woven. Time, space, matter, and the laws of the world begin to take form. They do not appear one after another in a careful sequence, but bloom outward all at once, like a tapestry woven in a single breath. Space stretches to contain what will come. Time gives it direction, a current for everything to move within. Matter solidifies into substance, and the laws are written into the bones of existence, gravity and light, the rhythm of cause and effect, the boundaries that separate one thing from another. The universe begins to exist in a way that can be measured, even if nothing yet exists to measure it. But a universe must have a center, a place where the threads of creation converge and hold still. The first act of creation is not a city or a kingdom, but a mountain. It is a simple thing, a mountain. It does not think or move. It simply stands, and that is precisely what the new world requires. A fixed point from which everything else can be understood. The Creator presses its will into the crust of the forming land, and the stone responds. Mount Coronet rises as the pillar around which the future region will gather. It pushes upward through the fabric of the world, a jagged spine that will divide the land into east and west. Its peak reaches into the clouds. Its roots sink deeper than the seas. This is not merely a landmark. It is the axis of the entire continent, the bone around which the rest of the body will form. Rivers will begin here. Valleys will be carved by the meltwater that flows from its slopes. The weather will break against its height. The mountain is the anchor for everything that will follow. With the mountain standing firm, the Creator continues its work. The land is separated from the sea, the sky is given its depth, the stars are placed in their distant orbits, pinpricks of light that will one day travel across the universe to reach the eyes of creatures not yet born. And then the guardians are drawn forth. From the same original source, three beings are shaped. Dialga is given dominion over time, over the flow of moments that will stretch from the first dawn to the last sunset. Palkia is given the realm of space, the vastness that holds all places. And Giratina is placed in the space between, the antimatter that balances the whole of existence. They are not rivals, they are aspects of a single act of creation, given form and purpose. Around them, the Creator shapes three more spirits, not for the governing of the cosmos, but for the observing of life. Uxie, the being of knowledge, is placed in the deepest water of a quiet lake. Mesprit, the being of emotion, is given another. Azelf, the being of willpower, is set into a third. They are the first witnesses, the first to truly see the world that has been made, and so the stage is set. The laws are written into the fabric of space. The mountain stands as the pillar of the world. The guardians take their places in time, space, and the shadows between. The observers sink into their lakes. The world is complete in its structure, but it is empty. No wind yet stirs the trees that have not grown. No rain falls upon the slopes of the great mountain. The world is a perfectly crafted vessel, waiting for its contents. The land lay quiet beneath the unmoving sky, waiting. In the shadow of Mount Coronet, the first stirrings of a world that would one day be called Hisui had begun. The mountain did not move, it simply stood, and it waited. When the 1,000 arms of Arceus finally withdrew from the act of creation, the universe was not yet complete. It had form, but it needed function. It needed forces that would not simply exist, but would govern. And so, from the light of the original egg, from the essence of the Creator itself, three distinct powers took shape. The first of these powers crystallized into the very essence of existence as we experience it. Dialga is born to govern the flow of time, ensuring that moments can pass. Time is not merely a river, it is a strict mechanism, a sequential chain of cause and effect. Without Dialga, there is no before, no after. There is just an eternal, flat present. Dialga is the heartbeat of the cosmos, the thing that makes the story of the universe progress, one tick at a time. Its form is tied directly to the adamant crystal, a material said to be as old as time itself, forged in that first breath of creation. But a story without a setting is just a list of events. It has no depth, no location. And so, immediately following, a second power emerged to give that story a stage. Palkia is born to govern space, giving every creature a place to exist. Space is the canvas. It is the vast expanse of the ocean, the height of the sky, the distance between your hand and the ground. Where Dialga moves the clock forward, Palkia holds the room open. It is tied to the lustrous globe, a pearl-like orb that shimmers with the curvature of reality itself. For every force, there is an opposing need. For every stage, there is a backstage, a reflection. There is a third child of Arceus, whom the common myths often overlook or misunderstand. Giratina is born as the strange third power, tied to antimatter and a world apart. Antimatter is not evil. It is simply the reverse side of the coin, the necessary balance. But it is volatile. It cannot coexist peacefully within the same space as normal matter. To prevent the collapse of everything the Creator had built, Giratina was placed in a separate dimension. It does not govern the time we count, nor the space we walk through. It governs the dark mirror of our reality, a realm of inversion and shadow, anchored to our world by the Griseous core. Three beings, from one source, Dialga, Palkia, Giratina. They were born in the same moment, from the same purpose, yet they govern completely incompatible realms. And this is the central tension of the entire myth of Sinnoh. Their shared origin becomes the source of centuries of confusion among humans. When the first peoples walked the land of Hisui and discovered the ruins of the Celestica, they found fragmented carvings. They found crystals of adamant and spheres of luster. They found references to a great power in the sky. But the text was ancient, the script unfamiliar, and the distinctions were blurred. Was the creator of the world the master of time? Or was it the master of space? Or was it something else buried in a distorted world? The Diamond Clan built their faith around the precision of time. The Pearl Clan built their faith around the expanse of space. Both believed they were worshipping Almighty Sinnoh. Both were correct in their worship of the part, yet incomplete in their understanding of the whole. The third power, Giratina, was quietly forgotten, a necessary darkness relegated to the edges of history. With these three pillars in place, the skeleton of reality was finally stable. The clock ticked, the space expanded, the distortion world kept its secret equilibrium. But a world of just time and space is an empty theatre. It has no audience. It has no actors. It has no heart, no mind, no will to experience its own existence. And so, Arceus turned its attention to the spaces within the mountains themselves, to the deep, cold lakes that dotted the landscape of the new world. Into these waters, the Creator placed three spirits, not to govern the laws of physics, but to govern the spirit of every thinking being that would ever live. The realm of the body was complete. Now, the realm of the heart was about to begin. With Dialga and Palkia set to their eternal tasks, the fabric of reality was now woven from the threads of time and space. But a universe, even a perfect one, can be a cold and empty thing without meaning. Arceus understood that for creation to have true purpose, there needed to be beings who could perceive it, who could reflect upon it, and who could shape its course through something as simple as a choice. And so, the original one turned its attention from the mechanics of the cosmos to the nature of the soul itself. From its own being, Arceus brought forth three new entities. They were not forces of nature like the three great dragons, but guardians of a different kind of power, a power that lives within every conscious creature. Arceus created Uxie, the being of knowledge, to watch over the accumulation of fact and memory. He created Mesprit, the being of emotion, to govern the tides of feeling and connection. And he created Azelf, the being of willpower, to embody the drive and determination that pushes every living thing forward. Knowledge, emotion, and willpower, the three pillars of the aware mind. To house these three spirits, the world was shaped once more. And three deep lakes formed across the land of Hisui, each positioned far from the others, perfectly hidden in the quiet geography of the region. They were not born of volcanic eruption or glacial retreat. They were crafted, tranquil and bottomless, as silent shrines to the three parts of the psyche. Their surfaces acted as perfect mirrors, not just for the sun and moon above, but for the inner reflection they were meant to inspire. In time, these lakes would be given names that spoke to their sacred purpose. Lake Acuity, set in the frozen north near the shadow of Mount Coronet, a place of crystalline clarity and memory, ruled by Uxie. Lake Verity, tucked away in the eastern lowlands, a gentle body of water reflecting the truth of one's heart, guarded by Mesprit. And Lake Valor, in the western marshlands, a wellspring of strength and resolve, home to Azelf. Each one an ancient reflection of human nature itself, painted directly onto the landscape by the hands of the Creator. But these guardians were not like the rampaging nobles of Hisui or the territorial lords of the wilderness. They were distant, ethereal. They hid in their caverns beneath the water's surface, watching and waiting. They did not test strength or speed. They tested worthiness. For the guardians knew that knowledge without wisdom can be dangerous. That emotion without control can be destructive. That willpower without virtue can become tyranny. So they remained distant, surrounded by the cold water and the quiet, waiting for the people of Hisui to grow wise enough, feeling enough, and brave enough to truly understand them, to look into the depths and finally see themselves. You might wonder why Arceus created the Lake Guardians at all. Dialga and Palkia hold the physical universe together. Giratina rules the dimension of antimatter. Why was the mind so important? Because a universe without an observer is just a silent mechanism. The Lake Trio represents that observer. They represent consciousness itself. Knowledge gives us a connection to the past. Emotion gives us a grasp of the present. Willpower lets us reach for the future. They are the core of what it means to exist, rather than simply to be. In the ancient records of the Celestica people, the Lake Guardians were revered, but rarely encountered. They were the silent partners in the creation myth. When the first humans set foot in Hisui, they sensed something profoundly sacred about these quiet lakes. They knew better than to plumb their depths. They left offerings at the water's edge and whispered prayers into the mist. The shrines were respected. The guardians remained unseen, a quiet presence just beneath the surface of reality, tucked away in caves of rock and shimmering water, sleeping or simply watching. And so the land of Hisui was complete. It had a spine in Mount Coronet. It had a heartbeat in the flow of time and the expanse of space. It had a soul in the three lakes. But the land itself was still a wild and untamed place, teeming with ancient Pokémon who had never known the companionship of a human trainer, carved by ice and forest and marsh. It was a land waiting for its first true stewards, a people who would walk its paths, befriend its creatures, and one day give the land a new name. The three lakes held their stillness. The spirits of knowledge, emotion, and willpower had taken their places at the bottom of their respective waters, and the inner world of every creature to come had been secured, but the outer world, the physical land itself, waited for its own shaping. Creation was not yet finished. Beneath the crust of the world, something vast was gathering its strength, a pressure that had been building since the first moments of existence, and it was about to break through. From deep within the earth, the land began to fold in on itself. Rock pushed against rock, heat pressed upward against cold stone, and slowly and possibly a mountain began to rise. It did not emerge in an instant. It grew with the slow patience of a world that had all the time it needed. It rose straight through the center of what would one day be called Hisui. It did not break the land so much as define it. Mount Coronet became the spine of the newborn land, dividing east from west. From that moment on, everything on one side of the mountain would be fundamentally different from everything on the other. The land had an orientation now, a left and a right, a morning side and an evening side, and around the slopes of this great mountain, the world began to diversify. Forests took root on the lower flanks, stretching their branches toward the sun, filtering the light into a dim and quiet green. The air beneath the canopy grew cool and damp, and the ground softened with layers of fallen leaves. Coastlines carved themselves into the eastern and western edges, where the land met the endless water in a slow and constant dance. The waves had a rhythm that predated the mountains. They had been moving long before the land rose. Wetlands pooled in the valleys, thick with the first mud and reeds, moving at a pace that could barely be measured. Higher up, snowfields settled onto the shoulders of Coronet, heavy and permanent, a domain of patience and absolute silence. And on the western frontier, volcanic reaches broke through the crust, venting the heat of the earth into the open air. The rock there was still young, still forming. There were no paths across this land, no roads, no bridges, no cities. The land existed purely for itself. The Pokémon that moved through it did so without urgency, without purpose, beyond the simple act of existence. The world was a garden, untended and wild. Every rustle of leaves in the forest was a new sound in the world. Every crash of waves against the coast was a rhythm that had never been heard before. The land did not yet know the weight of names or borders. It simply was, and in this untouched state, Hisui was established as the first great landscape of the Pokémon world. Not a collection of towns or routes to be travelled. The original wilderness from which all others would take their shape. To look upon Hisui in that first age was to see creation in its purest form. Every later region, from the volcanic islands of Hoenn to the frozen north of the far world, from the dense forests of Johto to the sandy shores of Alola, carries a piece of this origin. They are all, in mythic memory, distant echoes of this original land. The rolling hills of Johto echo the gentle slopes of Hisui. The volcanic intensity of Hoenn reflects the heat that still burns in the western reaches of the first land. The deep cold of the far north mirrors the snowfields of Coronet's Peak. Snow itself is the most direct descendant. The lakes still hold their guardians. The mountain still divides the region into east and west. The character of the land is still defined by that central spine, but look closely at any other region, and you can see the trace of that first creation. The way a river bends around a mountain, the way a volcano rises from a plain, the way a coastline meets the forest. The pattern of mountain, forest, coast and plain repeats itself across the entire world of Pokémon, because the first pattern is the one that worked. The first land is the one that was blessed. The shape of the world was decided here, in the shadow of a mountain that was the first of its kind. Every time a trainer in the modern era stands on a route and looks out over a landscape, they are witnessing a fragment of the original. The mountains remember being pushed up by the same hand that formed Mount Coronet. The rivers remember the same first rain. The soil remembers the same original dust. The echo of Hisui is present in every landscape, written into the very structure of the earth. It is the root. Everything else is the branch. When the shaping was finished, the land grew quiet. The mountains stood fixed. The rivers carved their courses. The wind moved over the new valleys, over the forests and the coastlines, and the snowfields. And the world settled into a long, deep breath. It was complete. And in that completeness, it waited, not out of anticipation, simply in a state of being as newly created things do. Hisui was the first, the root of all landscapes, the pattern from which all patterns were drawn, and in the stillness of that first age, it held its shape, patient and wild, ready for the history that was yet to come. As the land of Hisui took its final shape, Mount Coronet stood tall at its centre, dividing east from west. Around its slopes, the world Arceus had envisioned began to breathe with life. Forests stretched toward the coasts, wetlands gathered beneath the peaks, and in the far north, volcanic forces stirred beneath the surface, holding a secret that even the creators had not fully anticipated. The very act of shaping a world is never gentle, and the creation of volcanoes brings a dangerous consequence. Heatran. It is difficult to describe the birth of a creature like Heatran, because there was no egg, no nest, no parent watching over it. Heatran was born from the planet itself, a concentration of heat and pressure so immense that it developed a will. Deep in the darkest volcanic vent, miles below the surface, where the rock flows like water, elements fused together, metal and magma intertwined until a shape emerged from the glow. Heatran. Its body is forged from molten iron, a living furnace with an internal temperature hotter than any natural flame. When it moved for the first time, the entire northern continent felt the shift. The earth groaned. The seas near the shores began to simmer, while Dialga governed the flow of time and Palkia shaped the fabric of space. There were places where raw creation energy settled into something physical, something alive. Heatran was born from this leftover intensity, a creature of molten iron and volcanic fury. It had no desire to rule or to destroy for the sake of destruction. It simply was what it was, an eruption given form and will, and its will demanded release. Heatran's rage threatens the northern reaches of the young world. The ground trembled without warning. Skies darkened with ash. The temperature in the northern highlands climbed far beyond what the fragile new climate could sustain. Rivers of lava poured from fissures, melting their way across the landscape. This was not a passing tantrum. It was a sustained geological catastrophe. Heatran carved tunnels through the rock, surfacing wherever the crust was weakest. Each eruption shook the foundations of the northern continent. The heat radiating from its body could melt the very air, leaving trails of obsidian in its wake. Now, travel with me to the far north of this world, a region that will one day be known as Snow Point. Though no city stands there in this age, it is a land of endless winter. Snow that has never melted covers the ground in layers hundreds of feet thick. Lakes of solid ice reflect the grey sky. The air is sharp enough to crack stone. It is a harsh, frozen sanctuary, seemingly immune to the heat of the world. But Heatran's fury knew no boundaries. Snow Point's future is endangered long before Snow Point City exists. The permafrost, frozen since the dawn of time, began to weep. Streams of meltwater carved paths through the ancient ice. Steam rose from cracks that never known warmth. The northern ecosystem, what little of it existed, was thrown into chaos. There were no witnesses to mourn this, no civilization to weep for the melting of the eternal frost. But the loss would have been absolute. The northern character of Hisui would have been erased, replaced by a scorched, volcanic wasteland. It seemed as if this northern land was doomed, but the shaping of the world was not yet finished, and the universe, in its infinite architecture, had built safeguards. Deep within the mountains, ancient machines of stone and ice stirred. These were the primordial golems, created not by the late guardians, but by a force that understood the need for raw, physical power, a failsafe against imbalances that could not be corrected by knowledge, emotion, or willpower alone. When Regigas emerged, the ground trembled in a different way. This was not the tremor of destruction, but the steady footfall of purpose. The Titan's body was a patchwork of ancient stone, glowing faintly with internal energy. It rose from its slumber in what would one day be known as Snow Point Temple. Beside it, Regis moved with a cold so absolute that the very moisture in the air crystallized around it. Regirock was the immovable object, the shield and the seal. Ancient giants answer the crisis, hinting that even creation required protection. The battle between Heatran and the giants was not a fight of good versus evil in a human sense. It was a correction of the world's own imbalances. A war of elements waged across the northern wastes. Heatran spewed rivers of lava, only for Regis to freeze them solid mid-flow. Regirock sealed the volcanic vents, entombing the magma chambers. Regigigas, with strength enough to move continents, grappled with the lava Pokémon and dragged it deep beneath the earth. The landscape was reshaped by their struggle. Pillars of volcanic glass formed where lava met, impossible cold. Valleys were filled with cooled rock. Mountains were raised from the plains. Stark Mountain itself grew taller and more formidable, becoming a cage of cooled magma where Heatran was sealed, its rage giving way to a deep, slumbering heat. The fire was contained, locked beneath layers of stone that even the core Pokémon could not melt through. The giants, their primary directive fulfilled, returned to their long sleep. Regirock and Regis departed, their chambers lost to time and legend. Regigigas settled into the deepest chamber of Snow Point Temple, the earth folding over it, hiding it from the world that would one day forget it. But it remains there, sleeping, dreaming, ready. A hidden guardian watching over the north from beneath the ice. And so the northern lands were spared. The ice returned. The steam settled. The meltwater froze once more. Snow Point's future was secured. Its snowy slopes and icy caverns no longer threatened by the fire beneath the mountain. The crisis had passed. The land was stable. The world held its breath, unaware of how close it had come to ruin. The story of this conflict was lost to time. No records exist of the battle beneath Stark Mountain, but the evidence remains, sealed away, waiting. The fire beneath the mountain is not dead. It is simply sleeping, and the sleeping giants wait with it. Reminders that creation itself required protection. That balance must be enforced. The world was now ready for quieter things, ready for the soft footfall of the first people, for the building of the first settlements, for the legends that would later be told around fires that were controlled, warm, and safe. Heatran's rage threatened the northern reaches of the young world. The ice that had only recently settled into thick sheets across the polar cap now cracked and hissed, giving way to rivers of molten rock. Steam rose in great plumes, obscuring the sky. It seemed as though the cold north would be swallowed entirely by fire. But the creation of Hisui was never a blind or careless process. For every force of untamed chaos that rose, a counterbalance had been shaped from the same ancient clay, placed somewhere deep within the framework of the land, waiting. Long before the first human eye gazed upon the mountains of Hisui, there were others who answered the land's cry. Deep beneath the bedrock of the frozen north, in a chamber untouched by sunlight, something colossal stirred. Regigigas, the titan whose great hands had once pulled the continents into their rough positions across the globe. It felt disruption in the mold. The world was not finished, and it would not be undone. With Regigigas rose Regirock, whose body had formed from the pressure of entire mountain ranges, and Regis, a being of absolute zero, born in an age before the sun had fully warmed the world. Regigigas, Regirock and Regis intervened to stop Heatran's devastation. The conflict that followed was not a battle of fire and ice, in the way we understand combat between living creatures. It was a war of climate and geology. Regis moved across the land with terrifying speed, flash freezing the rivers of magma into black, brittle rock that crumbled into dust. Regirock pulled great slabs of the earth up from the crust, forming a deep and heavy prison around the source of the eruption. Regigigas met Heatran itself, not with a display of elemental fury, but with sheer monumental pressure. It locked the legendary Pokémon in a grip of cold stone, forcing it back into the deep fissure from which it had clawed its way into the open air. The victory was quiet and costly, ending not in celebration but in deep sleep. The energy required to subdue a being born directly from the planet's molten heart was immense. Regigigas did not destroy Heatran. It exhausted Heatran into dormancy, and in doing so, the ancient titan spent the last of its boundless strength. When the work was done, Regigigas let go. The lava hardened beneath the sealed volcano. The titan's arms fell to its sides. Its body, a mosaic of ancient stone held together by a will older than time, grew still. It did not fall here, at the site of the battle. It stood, and it walked slowly, with heavy steps that shook the earth across the entire northern frontier. It walked toward a place of permanent winter, a place where the deepest cold could help it rest. Regigigas rests beneath what will become Snowpoint Temple. The great titan laid itself down upon the frozen bedrock, and the snows of the north began to gather over its form, building a shroud of ice and silence that would thicken across countless millennia. The other titans did not stay. With their duty fulfilled, they withdrew to the edges of the known world. Regis found a solitary cavern in a frozen ocean, a place of eternal stillness. Regirock found a tomb of shifting sands, where the wind buried everything in time. They sealed themselves away, their immense power tucked deep within chambers of stone and ice. The ancient landscape became filled with sealed chambers, sleeping guardians, and forgotten promises. The first peoples of Hisui, when they eventually arrived, would find these chambers. They would leave offerings at the entrances. They would carve markings into the rock, telling stories of giants who slept in the deep places of the world. They would whisper legends of beings who had sacrificed their wakefulness so that the land might survive its own birth. The promise of their return, a vow made by the very earth itself, became a quiet thread in the fabric of the region, a thread that was slowly forgotten as the ages passed, buried beneath new stories, new fears and new gods. With the fires contained and the titans at rest, the land of Hisui was finally allowed to grow cold and quiet. Volcanic ash settled into rich soil. The great glaciers crept back down from the peaks, smoothing the scars of the battle. The world was no longer a place of raw, struggling creation. It had become a place of stillness, a finished vessel. The eruptions ceased. The ground grew solid, and in this profound silence, the earth was ready to receive the gentle weight of the first true footsteps. The age of the elements had passed into memory, and the land itself began to dream of what might walk across it next. The world, freshly shaped and deeply quiet, was finally ready for its first inhabitants. The titans of stone and ice fell into their deep slumber. The volcanic fires settled into quiet cracks beneath the surface of Stark Mountain. The mountains stood firm in their places, holding up the newborn sky, and in the shadow of the greatest of those mountains, a quiet people began to gather. These were the Celestica people. Their arrival marks the first human footsteps in the ancient land of Hisui. Unlike any settlers who would follow, they did not carve their homes into the most open or easily defended lowlands. Instead, they were drawn to the high places. They settled close to sacred ruins, mountain paths, and the borders of places where legendary Pokémon linger. They found the lakes where Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf silently dwelled, their presence a quiet hum in the background of the world. They walked the paths near the summit, where Dialga and Palkia warped the fabric of existence. They built shrines at the mouths of caves that led to Giratina's distorted realm. They did not fear the legendary Pokémon. They lived with their presence, a fact of the world as natural as the rising of the sun. This is an important detail, because it tells us something fundamental about how they saw the world. Later settlers came to Hisui, fearing the wild Pokémon, treating them as beasts to be controlled or avoided. The Galaxy team built high walls. The Diamond and Pearl clans split into factions, each trembling at the perceived wrath of their misunderstood creator. But the Celestica people appear to have understood something that the others forgot. They understood that humans and Pokémon do not simply coexist. They share one world. The land was not a resource to be claimed. It was a relative to be respected. Their entire civilization sprouted and grew in the shadow of Mount Coronet. The Great Mountain was their anchor. It was the spine of their world, the pillar that held up the sky, and always they lived under the silent gaze of Arceus. They did not build massive cities. Their presence in the archaeological record is quiet, subtle. Stone foundations built into the mountainsides, carvings on cliff faces, the Solacean ruins with their ancient murals depicting a world in harmony, the Snowpoint Temple, where a door remained locked for centuries, sealing something powerful inside, waiting for a time when the world would need it again. It is within this long, peaceful tenure that the stories of the ancient hero are set, a figure who stepped forward during a time of turmoil. Lightning strikes, enraged Pokémon, chaos spreading like a slow tide across the land. This hero gathered the 18 plates of Arceus, journeying across every corner of Hisui. Along the way, he befriended 10 Pokémon. These 10 would become the ancestors of the noble and ride Pokémon of later ages, worshipped as protectors of the region. After gathering the plates, the hero met Almighty Sinnoh. The texts are careful with their language here. By this he met Arceus, the original one, the one who created everything from nothing inside, an egg of pure light. The hero gained its respect and was blessed alongside his 10 companions. He later faced an almighty unknowable, a being of darkness and distortion, one that should not exist but does. Born from the same egg into a different purpose, he emerged victorious, and that entity returned to its domain of no place, a cave at the end of a long return path. This story is the core of Celestica spirituality. It is a story of connection, of courage, and of maintaining the balance of a shared world. And then, they vanished. The Celestica people left few records explaining their departure. The ruins they left behind speak of a light that faded, a light from Almighty Sinnoh. When that light dimmed, they knew it was time to go. Why did the light fade? Was it a test, a natural cycle, or did the people themselves lose their connection to that sacred understanding? The knowledge is lost to time. The ruins show no clear signs of war or sudden catastrophe. There is no record of struggle, just a quiet end, a departure into mystery. Some say they ascended the mountain and simply walked into the light. Some say they returned to the Pokémon, their spirits becoming the guardian ghosts that watch over the ruins this very day. The most direct answer from the myths is that they left everything behind. Temples to Arceus and shrines to the hero stood empty. The murals on the walls began to fade in the weather. Wind and snow filled the ancient courtyards. The names of their villages were forgotten by the next generation. For a long time, Hisui was empty of human voices. The land returned entirely to its wild state. The forests grew thick and tall over the old roads. The sacred ruins became sleeping places, known only to the wind and the ghosts of the past. Selassian became a labyrinth of whispers. The temple on the mountaintop was buried in snow and clouds. The memory of the Celesta people settled deep into the soil, but eventually new people arrived. They found the ruins of the Celestica. They found the temples. They found the legends of the plates and the hero, but they did not fully understand what they had found. These new arrivals came from different places, with different languages, and very different fears. They saw the mountain. They felt the presence of powerful beings, and they tried to give those beings names that matched their own understanding of the world. They split into two groups. The Diamond Clan believed Almighty Sinnoh was a master of time. The Pearl Clan believed it was a master of space. Each was partly right and completely wrong. They worshipped, and they feared, and they built a new society on the bones of the old. The quiet memory of the Celestica remained in the stone and the soil. A whisper of a time when humans and Pokémon understood the same language. A time before the names of the gods were argued over by the children, who had simply forgotten their own history. The Celestica people did not vanish without leaving a record of their existence. Across the slopes of Mount Coronet, they carved their beliefs into stone, etching symbols and scenes that would outlast any single generation. These carvings were not mere decoration. They were a form of preservation, a way to hold on to truths that felt too important to lose. In the ruins they left behind, fragments of an old language have been discovered, offering glimpses into how the Celestica understood the world. They saw patterns in the natural order that others might miss, and they tried to encode those patterns into their art and architecture. The stones they worked with are weathered now, but the messages endure, waiting for anyone who takes the time to read them. Their stories speak of a divine being beyond full human understanding. The Celestica did not claim to have all the answers. Instead, they described this entity through metaphor and mystery, using symbols that pointed towards something vast and unknowable. They recognized that some truths are too large to be captured in simple words, so they turned to carvings and ruins to suggest what could not be said directly. This being was not seen as something to be conquered or even fully comprehended. It was simply present, woven into the fabric of the mountains and lakes that surrounded them. The Celestica lived in relationship with this presence, honoring it through the careful way they tended to their sacred places. But the Celestica people eventually faded from Hisui. Their cities became ruins. Their language ceased to be spoken aloud. Yet the knowledge they carried did not disappear entirely. Their descendants, scattered across the region, retained traces of the old wisdom. These fragments passed from one generation to the next, sometimes distorted, sometimes preserved with remarkable clarity. Even in the modern era, the influence of the Celestica can be felt in the quiet traditions of those who trace their lineage back to the ancient mountain settlers. One particular place holds the memory of the Celestica more than any other. Celestic Town stands as a small surviving wound in the fabric of a vanished civilization. It is not a grand city. It is a modest settlement, nestled near a body of water, with a sense of stillness that seems to belong to another time. The people who live there carry the weight of old stories. Even if they do not always speak of them aloud, the very ground beneath the town holds echoes of the Celestica, their buried foundations and forgotten pathways, now resting beneath the homes of the living. To walk through Celestic Town is to feel the presence of something older, something that has not yet been fully exhumed or explained. The Celestica memory is not a loud one. It does not demand attention. It lingers in the details. The way a carving angles toward a certain peak, the repetition of a symbol on a weathered stone, the quiet persistence of a name that has survived centuries of change. Those who look closely enough can still find the threads connecting the present to that ancient past. The Celestica believed in a divine being that transcended human understanding. And they built their lives around that belief, leaving behind the evidence for others to discover in their own time. As the Celestica people receded, the world they shaped did not return to emptiness. New eyes would soon look upon Mount Coronet and the lakes below it, and new hands would build new structures atop the old foundations. But the stone remembers, and in the quiet moments when the wind moves through the ruins, it is still possible to hear the faint echo of a people who once called this sacred mountain home. Long after the Celestica were gone, their surviving symbols would become clues for scholars, travelers, and descendants seeking to understand the region's oldest mysteries. The ruins of Celestic Town became more than relics. They became a meeting point between memory and discovery, a place where the past could still speak to those willing to listen. Every inscription offered another piece of a larger story. Though no single carving could reveal the whole of it, perhaps that was the lesson the Celestica intended to leave behind. Knowledge is not always meant to be possessed all at once. Sometimes it must be gathered patiently, stone by stone, generation by generation. Their civilization may have fallen silent, but its questions remain alive beneath Mount Coronet, carried forward by the people of Hisui and Sinnoh alike. The Celestica people preserved their stories in stone, in carvings that lined the mountain passes of Hisui. They spoke of a divine being whose nature could not be fully grasped by the human mind. But the peace of that ancient understanding was not fated to last. Hisui entered an age of disorder. It was a time marked by violent lightning that tore across the sky without warning, bolts that came not from a storm, but from the clear air itself. And the Pokémon, the creatures that shared the land with humanity, began to rage. They snapped at the hands that fed them. They fled from the very people who had once walked beside them in trust. The natural balance between people and Pokémon began to fracture. It was a slow unraveling at first. A strange look in the eyes of a once faithful partner. A wild cry in the night that carried a new and terrible weight. But slowly, surely, the fracture deepened. The bond that had held the world together since the days of creation was growing weak. Ordinary settlements could not confront these forces. There was no army strong enough to fight the weather. There was no wall tall enough to keep out the fury of a creature touched by this strange divine madness. The villagers could only watch as the sky cracked open above their homes. They could only huddle as the ground trembled beneath the feet of enraged titans. These forces did not feel like nature. They felt like a judgment pouring down from the heavens themselves. And then into this chaos stepped a figure. History does not remember their name. We do not know their face or the clan they came from. They are remembered only as the ancient hero, where others saw only the end of the world. This hero saw a path forward. It was a long path and a lonely one. The hero began to walk the land, gathering the 18 plates of Arceus, scattered across the continent like fragments of a broken mirror. With every plate recovered, the hero drew closer to the source of all creation. But the hero did not walk alone for long. During the journey, 10 specific Pokémon chose to join the cause. They were not captured or conquered. They were befriended. Each one was convinced, through patience and courage, that the world was worth saving. These 10 companions would become the ancestors of the noble Pokémon, the great protectors that would later be worshipped across Hisui. When at last the plates were gathered, the hero climbed the high slopes of Mount Coronet, the spine of the world. At the summit, the hero met almighty Sinnoh itself, not the Dialga of the Diamond Clan, nor the Palkia of the Pearl Clan, but the true origin, the being that had hatched from the egg in the void. The hero stood before Arceus and was found worthy. A blessing was given to the hero and to the 10 companions who had followed so faithfully. There was one final trial, what the old records call the Almighty Unknowable, a being of pure antimatter, of the domain of no place. The hero faced this entity on the threshold between worlds. The hero endured, and the unknowable retreated to its shadowed realm. The lightning began to ease. The rage within the Pokémon quieted. The The storms withdrew from the highlands and the valleys, and when the journey was complete, a great temple was raised at the summit of Mount Coronet. It was built in honor of the hero, in honor of the companions who had saved the land, and in honor of the Creator who had set it all in motion. The light had returned to Hisui, and the people finally had a story they could hold on to, a memory carved not just in stone, but into the very heart of the region itself. Yet even this victory did not bring a single, lasting truth. As generations passed, the details of the ancient hero's journey became blurred by distance, retold differently around different fires. Some remembered the hero as a mortal chosen by the heavens. Others believed the hero had become something more, a guardian whose spirit remained upon the mountain. The 10 companions became sacred ancestors, their descendants honored as nobles, watched over by wardens who carried their traditions into a new age. The temple upon Mount Coronet remained, but its meaning changed with every passing century. To some, it was proof that Almighty Sinnoh had blessed humanity. To others, it was a warning. The mountain had always been a bridge between the ordinary world and forces far beyond it. Its summit was not simply a place to be conquered, it was a place to be approached with humility. And beneath the peace restored by the hero lay an unsettling truth. The almighty unknowable had not been destroyed, it had only been driven back. Somewhere beyond the fabric of the world, in a realm without time, it remained, waiting in silence. The people of Hisui could rebuild their homes. They could restore their bonds with Pokémon. They could look to the mountain and remember the age when the sky itself had turned against them. But they could never truly forget that creation had a shadow, and that even the brightest blessing from the heavens carried the possibility of darkness. Before we dive deeper into this incredible journey, curious, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and let our global community know. And if you're finding this as mind-blowing as I am, hit that like button to help more people discover this story. The world of Hisui had become a difficult place for any creature to walk through peacefully. The storms of lightning and fear described earlier were not simply a passing season. They had settled into the very breath of the land, and every living thing felt it. The people of the earliest settlements watched the skies with uncertainty, and the Pokémon that once grazed calmly near their camps had pulled away into the shadows of the mountains and the deep forests. Communication had broken down. Even the most basic understanding between human and Pokémon had eroded into suspicion. The fracture between species had grown wide, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for someone who could bridge the gap. Into this quiet desperation came a figure who would later be remembered only as the ancient hero. No one recorded his true name. The carvings left by the Celestica people show a simple silhouette, a human form standing apart from the structures of village life, and that is intentional. For all the power he would eventually embody, the ancient hero begins not as a ruler, but as a traveller in a broken land. He brought no crown and carried no weapon meant for conquest. His purpose was entirely different. He sought answers across every corner of Hisui, rather than conquering it by force. He wanted to understand why the world had fallen out of balance, and whether it could ever be restored. His path took him from the shores of the Eastern Sea to the high frozen passes of the Great Mountain at the centre of the region. He walked through the tangle of the Crimson Mylands and climbed the white plains of the Alabaster Icelands. He did not rush, he observed. He listened to the wind and the rumble of the volcano and the quiet calls of Pokémon hidden in the brush. And as he moved, he encountered the creatures of this land in a way that no human before him had truly attempted. His journey becomes a test of patience, courage, and trust in between species. He learned to read the posture of a panicked beast, to recognize the difference between a warning cry and a desperate call for help. Every interaction was a lesson, and every lesson cost him something. A scrap of food offered, a night of sleep forfeited, sometimes blood from a wound given by a creature that did not yet understand he meant no harm. But the hero did not waver, and he did not grow bitter. He understood a truth that the fractured world had forgotten. The hero's greatest strength is his willingness to approach frightened Pokémon with compassion. When a Pokémon lashed out, he did not strike back. When a creature fled, he did not give chase. He sat at the edge of their territory and waited until curiosity overcame fear. He extended his empty hands and let them examine his scent. He spoke in low, steady tones that meant nothing in literal words but everything in intention. This was not weakness. This was the hardest discipline imaginable. To offer trust when the world had given him every reason to expect betrayal. Slowly the land began to open itself to him. As he proved his character through countless small acts of patience, signs began to appear. Strange tablets embedded in the stone of caves, hidden beneath the roots of ancient trees, resting at the bottom of cold mountain streams, the plates of creation. Each one carried a fragment of the original power that shaped the universe from the void. Arceus had scattered them across history long ago, and the hero was the first to gather them with pure intent. And as he gathered them, something remarkable happened. Pokémon that had never tolerated a human presence began to walk beside him, 10 of them in total. Some carried him across rivers, too swift to ford. Others stood guard while he slept in the open. These were not servants. They were companions, equals who recognized a leader who led with patience, not fear. They were the ancestors of the noble Pokémon that would later be worshipped as protectors of the land. When the hero finally climbed to the highest peak of Mount Coronet, he met the one who had been watching all along, almighty Sinnoh, not the Dialga of the Diamond Clan or the Palkia of the Pearl Clan, as they would later misunderstand, but the original creator of the concept of Sinnoh itself, Arceus. The hero did not bow in desperate worship. He stood as an equal, a spirit who had proven the strength of his character, and Arceus blessed him and his companions, and the journey that had brought them there. There was one more trial described in the oldest fragments of Celestica, writing, a battle against what they called the almighty unknowable, an entity of such deep otherness that it seemed to exist in a place completely beyond the world the hero knew. Some records suggest this was Giratina, cast out for its violent nature during the original creation. The truth is kept deliberately unclear in the scriptures we have left. What is known is that the hero faced this being, was tested at the deepest level of his spirit, and was approved. The entity, whatever it was, withdrew to a domain of no location, a prison or a refuge, depending on how the old story is read, and the hero returned to the temple that would be built in his honor on the mountain. The hero had walked alone, but he did not finish alone. He had found what no ruler could claim by force, a deep and lasting trust between himself and the living world of Hisui. The land for a time settled into a quiet peace. The lightning receded. The Pokémon returned to their valleys and forests. The people began to build in safer places, and the temples rose on the mountain to honor the memory of the journey that had saved them. But the hero himself did not stay. He had come as a traveler, and a traveler he remained. He walked away from the stone walls and the ceremonial songs, leaving behind a land that had learned what he had come to teach. That trust between species was not a fragile hope, but the very foundation of survival. And in his absence, the land held its peace for a long, long time, waiting for the next moment in its story. To find what was broken, the hero first had to understand what was whole. The answer he found across the next corner of Hisui was not a person, and it was not a beast. It was a slab of smooth, dark stone, too perfect to be a simple rock, too old to be made by human hands. It was a plate, a piece of something infinite, fallen into the finite world. There were 18 such plates in existence. Arceus had created them at the very beginning, shaping them out of its own will. Each one was a fragment of the original force that shaped the universe. The hero searched for the 18 plates connected to Arceus and the world's elemental forces. This was not a hunt for treasure, not a campaign of conquest. There was no greed in his hands when he picked up the first one. There was only recognition. He was looking at a piece of the first morning. Each plate represents another fragment of creation and another step toward understanding. The splash plate taught him about the depth of the ocean, the quiet pressure of places where light does not reach, and the endless current that connects every shore. The flame plate was not just heat, it was the energy of renewal, the fire that clears the old forest so that new life can breathe. The meadow plate was soft against his skin, but it held the fierce, patient will of nature that grows through solid rock and outlasts empires. These were not simple items. They were the original languages of the world, written before any alphabet of man or Pokémon. The quest turns Hisui itself into a sacred map where every biome holds a clue. The hero could not walk a straight line and find them all. The land itself demanded he earn the right to its secrets. He had to trust the landscape completely. The icicle plate was waiting for him in the silent white of the Alabaster Icelands, a place so cold that sound itself seemed to freeze mid-air. The dread plate was buried deep in the crimson Mirelands, in a bog that swallowed light and echoed with the whispers of forgotten things. The earth plate did not rest on the surface. It lay within the deepest caverns, formed by the bones of Mount Coronet itself. Every step he took was a verse in a geography he was only beginning to read. As the plates gather, the hero moves closer to the truth behind Almighty Sinnoh. The weight of his satchel grew heavier with each discovery, but the confusion in his spirit grew lighter. He was beginning to understand that the plates were not scattered by accident. They were placed with careful intention, placed by a hand that wanted to be found, slowly. Each plate was a clue left behind by a creator who did not speak in words, but in fire, water, grass, stone, and electricity. The more he collected, the more the world around him began to make a terrible and beautiful sense. A pattern was emerging. A story was telling itself. During this journey, the hero did not travel in complete silence or solitude. The old stories tell us he befriended 10 Pokémon along the way. These were not random encounters. His journey mirrored the nature of the plates themselves. He found a partner in the heights of the mountains, drawn by the roar of the sky. He found another in the depths of a waterfall, resting in the mist. These 10 Pokémon were drawn to him because they recognized what he was carrying. They felt the resonance of the 18 plates resting against his skin. They became the ancestors of the noble and ride Pokémon who would later guard these lands. They were the first to trust a human enough to stand beside him against the chaos. The time of lightning and fear did not end with a single grand battle. It ended with a single traveller, walking the entire circle of the world, bending down to pick up the scattered pieces of a broken god. Every biome of Hisui became a chapter in a story that was leading him home. When he finally held the last plate, the entire region trembled, not in fear but in deep recognition. The land knew him, the mountains knew him, the stars themselves seemed to lean a little closer. The hero had found the truth, and so the path to the summit of Mount Coronet was finally revealed. The Temple of Sinnoh had not yet been built by human hands, but the mountain already knew he was coming. All that remained was the climb, to stand before the Creator, and to offer back what had been scattered for so long. The world was holding its breath, waiting for the final step. The search for the 18 plates was a journey across a fractured world. It demanded passage through every land and every season, but the hero never walked those paths completely alone. You see, Hisui is not a place that can be crossed by human strength alone. The mountains are too steep, the rivers too wide, the snow too deep. The world of early Hisui was still raw. It had not yet settled into the quiet shape that later generations would know. And yet across these landscapes, the hero found allies, not by demanding their obedience, but by sharing the same struggle for survival. In the Obsidian Fieldlands, he met a partner who could see across the endless plains, whose antlers caught the wind and whose hooves knew the hidden trails. In the Crimson Mirelands, he found one who could sense the hidden paths beneath the mud, whose strength could part the bogs, and whose patience matched the slow turning of the seasons. In the Cobalt Coastlands, a companion rose from the deep to guide him through the currents, carrying him across waters that would have swallowed any boat. In the Coronet Highlands, a swift climber showed him the ledges he could never reach alone, teaching him that the highest paths require a different kind of trust. And in the forests, a guardian emerged whose blades could cut through the thickest growth, clearing the way forward when the trees closed in. Along the way, the hero befriends 10 Pokémon rather than commanding them as servants. This is the detail that separates his story from any that come before or after. In the ruins left by the Celestica people, the carvings do not show the hero holding a weapon. They show him with his hands open. They show him kneeling. They show him sharing food and fire in the shadow of the mountain. The older relationship between humans and Pokémon was one of caution. The hero replaced caution with trust. Each of the 10 chose to stay. They were not caught in stone or bound by chains. They stayed because the hero understood what they needed: a place of safety, a shared purpose, a way to calm the rage that the broken world had stirred inside them. It took years, perhaps a lifetime. A single journey across Hisui is not a matter of weeks. The lands were too vast, the dangers too many. The hero and his 10 companions learned each other's rhythms. They learned when to rest and when to press on. They learned the language of gesture and glance. The bond that formed between them was not the bond of a trainer and their team, as later generations would know it. It was the bond of a traveller and the land itself, made manifest in the creatures who knew the land best. The hero did not seek to tame them. He sought to understand them, and in understanding, he earned their loyalty without demanding it. These companions become the ancestors of Hisui's noble and ride Pokémon. Every noble lord and lady that the Diamond and Pearl clans later revere traces its lineage back to one of these original 10. The great Wyrdeer of the Obsidian Fieldlands descends from the one who first guided the hero across the open plains. The mighty Ursaluna of the Crimson Mylands carries the blood of the one who taught the hero how to read the land through scent and instinct. The swift Sneasler of the Coronet Highlands inherits the grace of the one who climbed alongside the hero through the most treacherous passes. The graceful Basculegion of the Cobalt Coateslands remembers the pull of the currents that its ancestor once shared with a human who could not swim. The powerful Cleaver in the forests carries the memory of the one who first chose to spare a stranger instead of striking him down. The others too take their places in the sacred geography of the region. Each one is a living monument to a shared journey that history has turned into myth. Their partnership represents an older relationship between humans and Pokémon. Mutual survival. The hero depended on their strength to cross cliffs and rivers. The Pokémon depended on the hero's wisdom to navigate the rage of the frenzied world. The hero could not survive the wilderness alone. The Pokémon could not find peace in the chaos alone. Together, they formed a unit that was more than the sum of its parts. It was not ownership, it was a covenant. A shared life between two species in a land that was still being formed, still being tamed by the very forces that had created it. They slept in the same caves. They ate from the same small fires. They bled from the same wounds. The hero's body grew stronger as the journey wore on, hardened by the elements, but he was never the strongest creature in his company. His strength was in his voice, in his hands that could prepare medicine, in his eyes that could read the patterns of the sky, and the 10 understood this. They protected him, not because they were told to, but because they knew that without him, the journey would end. Without them, it would never begin. This bond is so deep that the memory of it barely survives the long centuries. Later generations will worship these 10 lineages as protectors, without fully knowing their origin. By the time of the Diamond and Pearl clans, the 10 original friends are no longer remembered as individuals. The names fade, the specific moments vanish. What remains is the image of power guided by purpose. The nobles are given offerings. They are appeased with flutes and balms. The people build shrines at the base of their territories and tell stories of their strength. They know the nobles are special, chosen, blessed, but they no longer know the name of the human who first earned their trust. The story of the hero and his 10 companions becomes a single shining legend. The ancient hero and the great 10. The worship in later times is rich with ritual, but poor with memory. The people pray to the great Pokémon of the land. They leave offerings of food and berries. They learn to play the flutes that summon them. The bond between human and Pokémon that the hero pioneered has become something else. It has become tradition, duty, faith. The nobles are seen as emissaries of the divine, and in a way, they are. They carry the legacy of the one human who first bridged the gap between the mortal and the wild. But the clans do not tell the story of how that bridge was first built. They do not sing of the hero's quiet conversations with his 10 friends under the stars. They sing only of the power and the light. The origin fades, as all origins do, into the simple certainty of belief. When the last of the plates was gathered, the hero did not stand alone. The 10 stood with him at the base of Mount Coronet, where the sky opens onto something older than the world. It is said that the mountain was quiet that night. The lightning that had scarred the land for so long had finally stopped. The winds had settled into a low, steady hum. The frenzy that had gripped the land seemed to hold its breath. Together, the hero and his 10 companions had survived the chaos. Together, they had restored a balance that was almost lost. The hero turned to face the slope. He left the 10 at the mountain's threshold, trusting them to guard the path behind him. Each one knew its place. Each one had its duty. They would wait. They would remember. The hero ascended alone, toward the summit, toward the source of the plates themselves, toward the being who had watched the entire journey unfold from the very beginning. And the 10 stayed behind, silent and patient, carrying the weight of everything they had shared into the long quiet of the world that followed. The hero's 10 companions are remembered through the sacred Pokémon of Hisui. That memory did not fade when the hero's own journey came to an end. Instead, it took root in the land itself. The bond he formed was not a private one, limited to a single moment in time. It was inherited, passed down through the bloodlines of the Pokémon who walked beside him. Their descendants guide travelers through mountains, waters, skies, and dangerous wilderness. This is the deeper purpose woven into the legacy of the first Guardians. Consider the great Wyrdeer of the Obsidian Fieldlands. Its ancestor was one of the hero's loyal companions, a creature that learned to read the calmness in a human's heart. Today, its descendants still carry that understanding. They do not startle easily, nor do they lash out at unfamiliar footsteps. Instead, they wait. They test your intentions with a patience that seems older than the land itself. To earn the trust of a Wyrdeer is to prove that you carry the same quiet respect the hero once showed the original 10. The journey across the Fieldlands is not simply a matter of distance. It is a trial of character. The waters of the coastlands are watched over by the descendants of another companion. The massive Basculegion that leap through the rushing currents do not see humans as masters. They see them as partners. Without the bond passed down from that ancient ancestor, such a creature would have no reason to carry a rider through waterfalls that would crush stone. It does so because the memory of trust is stronger than the instinct of the wild. Noble Pokémon become living links between the wild land and human settlement. Their presence defines the safety of every region. Clever watches over the forest of the Fieldlands. Its axe is a sign of both danger and protection. A wounded or unsettled Clever does not merely threaten the people nearby. It shakes the very balance of the territory. The earth grows restless, the forests close in, and the path between villages becomes treacherous. The same is true for Lilligant in the Crimson Mirelands, whose grace keeps the marshlands in bloom, or Arcanine on the windswept coasts, whose fire holds back the chill of the open sea. Peace in Hisui is not enforced by walls or weapons. It is maintained through the health of these relationships. When the people of the Diamond and Pearl clans approach a noble, they do not do so with chains or commands. They offer balms. They offer respect. They remind the guardian of the pact made long ago by the hero and his 10 companions. The story suggests that Hisui's safety was built upon trust, not control. This is a profound departure from the world that modern Sinnoh would eventually become. In the time of Diamond and Pearl, strength is measured by badges, by gyms, by the number of Pokémon collected into a small steel ball. Control is the foundation of that system. You capture by weakening, you command by proving dominance. But in ancient Hisui, the relationship was reversed. You could not force a noble to calm. You could not catch the guardian of the highlands and demand its obedience. You had to earn its gaze. You had to prove that the trust placed by the hero so long ago was not misplaced. The highlands are home to Sneasler, a guide through the sheer cliffs and the poisoned air that lingers in the mountain passes. Without its protection, entire regions of the Coronet Highlands would be inaccessible. Sneasler does not serve because it is bound. It serves because the bond is woven into its very nature. The same is true of bravery, whose powerful wings carry travelers over peaks that would take weeks to cross on foot. The sky itself is only open because the descendant of one of the hero's companions holds the memory of that first kindness. When the land becomes dangerous, when the lightning of an angry world splits the mountain passes, it is the nobles who stand between the people and chaos. Their role is not to enslave the wild, it is to hold it steady, to remind the earth itself that peace is possible. Lord Avalug of the Alabaster Icelands does not rule the snow by force. It endures. It carries the weight of the frozen landscape upon its back, allowing settlements to exist on the edge of the endless cold. Its patience mirrors the hero's own patience when he first walked among the 10, learning their ways instead of demanding them to change. The bond the hero left behind became the architecture of Hisui. Without it, there would be no safe passage between the fieldlands and the coastlands. Without it, the Coronet Highlands would remain an unbroken wall of stone. The hero's companions are remembered not in statues alone, but in the steady rhythm of travel and survival that defines life in Hisui. Every time a rider climbs onto the back of a Wyrdeer, every time a traveller leaps from a waterfall with a Basculegion beneath them, they are participating in a trust that has lasted for generations. This trust is the very foundation of the ancient civilization. The people of Hisui did not simply live beside these powerful creatures. They built their villages around the roots the nobles protected. They shaped their rituals around the cycles of the guardians. The Celestica people carved stories into the stone walls of the highlands, depicting the hero and his companions, reminding every generation that control was never the answer. The land could not be conquered, it could only be befriended. The framework for living in Hisui was complete. The descendants of the hero's companions stood watch over their domains, guiding travelers from the dangerous wilds into the warmth of human settlement. The storms that once broke the land began to quiet. The lightning became less frequent. The enraged Pokémon of a forgotten age slowly returned to a state of balance. Hisui was never a land of easy abundance. It was a land of hard-earned harmony. And once that harmony was established, once the trust between human and Pokémon was woven into the daily fabric of existence, the people could finally turn their attention upward. They looked toward the towering peak of Mount Coronet, the mountain that Arceus had forged at the beginning of all things. The hero had walked its slopes. His companions had climbed its ridges. Now the clans who inherited his legacy felt something stir within them, a desire to honor not just the bond, but the being who had set the entire story into motion. The hero had walked the entire breadth of Hisui. He had felt the heat of volcanic stone beneath his feet and the bite of ice from the highest peaks. He had crossed rivers that ran so deep you could not see the bottom, and forests so thick that the sun never touched the ground. He had gathered the 18 plates, one by one, each one a fragment of the world's original substance, a piece of the primal force that had shaped the land from the beginning. And now, with the plates gathered, The ancient hero reaches the heights of Mount Coronet. He does not bring his 10 companions all the way to the summit. They wait for him at the tree line, their eyes following him as he climbs the final ridge, their voices silent in his mind. The air changes as he rises. It grows thin and cold, but also still, perfectly still. The wind does not howl here. It holds its breath. The summit is not what he expected. The Celestica, the people who had first told the story of this mountain, had always spoken of a temple, but the summit is a temple in the shape of the raw earth, a ring of stone, a sky that looks deeper than any sky he has ever seen. And in the center of that ring, there is light. Not a bright, blinding light, but a light that seems to come from within the mountain itself, from within the fabric of the world. He encounters the being known in old stories as Almighty Sinnoh. The stories had prepared him for a creature of immense size, a dragon of time or a beast of space. But the being before him is not a shape he can fully recognize. It is form and formless. It is a presence that fills the space without occupying it. It is the first music, the first word, the first thought that gave birth to all that exists. The hero falls to his knees, not out of fear, but out of a deep and overwhelming recognition. This is the source. This is what the clans had tried to name. The Diamond clan called it Dialga, the master of time. The Pearl clan called it Palkia, the ruler of space. But these were the fingers of the hand, not the hand itself. The meeting reveals that the divine name is larger than any one creature or any one clan can understand. The being before him is Arceus, the original one, the one who dreamed the universe into being, and then woke to find the dream was real. The hero understands now why the clans could not agree. They were both right and both wrong. Because the truth of this being was so vast that no single perspective could ever capture it. And then something happens that the stories do not always tell. Arceus looks at the hero, not with eyes, but with an awareness that touches every part of him, every choice he has made, every path he has walked. It sees the 18 plates arranged before him, gathered from the far corners of the land. It sees the 10 Pokémon who wait below, creatures he did not command, but befriended, creatures whose trust he earned through patience and respect and shared hardship. It sees the lightning-scarred fields he crossed, the enraged Pokémon he calmed not with force, but with a gentle hand. And in that deep and silent recognition, Arceus recognizes the hero's devotion to both the land and its Pokémon. It is the union of the two worlds that pleases the creator. The hero did not seek to tear the land apart to satisfy his own needs. He did not seek to enslave the creatures of Hisui. He sought to live in balance, to heal what was broken, to understand what was unknown. A light descends upon the hero, not a reward for conquest, but a blessing of alignment. He has become the first human to fully understand the purpose of Hisui. He is the bridge between the wild and the civilized. He will carry this understanding back down the mountain, and the being, having made itself known, withdraws, not into hiding, but into the silence from which it watches all of creation unfold. The mountain is once again a mountain of stone and snow, but the hero knows it will never be just a mountain again. It is a threshold. It is the place where the veil between worlds grew thin. When the hero returns to his people, he carries a story that will become the foundation of a civilization. The Celestica people, the ones who had first inhabited this land, listen to his account. They climb the mountain themselves and build a temple on the exact spot of the encounter. They carve the symbols of the 18 plates into the walls. They honor the 10 Pokémon whose descendants will one day rise to become the Wardens, the noble Pokémon, the guardians of every pass and river and peak. And the hero himself fades into the background of his own myth, becoming a figure of legend, the one who walked the world and met the creator. But the Celestica people in time vanish. There are theories about why they left the region, but the physical evidence simply stops. Their ruins remain, their temples remain, and their story, the story of the meeting at the summit, remains. It is carried forward by the clans who come after them. The Diamond clan and the Pearl clan inherit this vast and powerful mythology. but they inherit it incomplete. They know Almighty Sinnoh is real. They know the hero met it, but the details, the nuances, the truth that the name was too large for any single understanding, these are lost to the noise of time. The Diamond Clan focuses on the steady rhythm of time, the turning of the seasons, the inevitability of change. The Pearl Clan focuses on the infinite expanse of space, the mountains that divide the land, the waters that must be crossed. And both clans look to Mount Coronet. Both clans tell the story of the hero. Both clans build their faith around the name Almighty Sinnoh, but they never agree on what that name truly means. They cannot, because the summit is too high, the air too thin, the memory of that single moment too distant. The truth of the meeting at the summit is buried beneath generations of interpretation and belief. The hero knew the truth. The Celestica tried to preserve it. The clans inherited only the echo, but that echo is powerful enough to shape the entire region. It divides the clans, it defines their history, and it waits silently at the peak of Mount Coronet for another traveller, in another age, to climb high enough to see the light for themselves once more. The ancient hero did not arrive at the summit of Mount Coronet seeking power. He arrived carrying the weight of the 18 plates, each one a fragment of the world's memory, each one a testament to the journey he had undertaken. And when he stood before the being his people would call Almighty Sinnoh, the creature looked not at the collection of plates, but at the man who had gathered them, and at the 10 loyal partners who had walked that path beside him. The bond was the proof, the unity was the test, and in that moment, the original one offered its blessing. But a blessing from the original one was not a shower of gold or a declaration of war. It was a silence, a deep, resonant stillness that settled over the summit of Mount Coronet. The hero felt it in his bones. His 10 Pokémon felt it in their spirits. The bond between them, tested across 1,000 miles and 1,000 dangers, was accepted as worthy. And in that acceptance, the chaos that had torn Hisui apart for so long simply stopped. The skies that had wept lightning fell quiet. The seas that had churned in fury grew calm. The noble Pokémon returned to their duties, no longer driven mad by the imbalance. Hisui was given a chance to heal. The land breathed again. The rivers flowed clear. The mountains no longer trembled with anger. For the first time in an age that no one could remember, the land was truly at peace. This moment on the summit became the foundation of later religious traditions across the region. The Temple of Sinnoh was raised upon that very spot, a monument not just to the original one, but to the connection forged between the divine and the mortal that day. The ancient hero walked into legend. His 10 Pokémon were enshrined as the first noble guardians, their descendants continuing the sacred duty of protecting the people. The Celestica people, the first civilization of Hisui, incorporated this blessing into the very core of their identity. Their murals, their artifacts, their entire way of life seemed to revolve around this singular event. Yet, the true identity of the god at the summit began to blur almost immediately in retelling. In the days and weeks that followed, the hero shared his experience. But words are poor vessels for divine encounters. The light he described was interpreted by some as the glow of time itself. The shifting space around the being was seen by others as clear evidence of the master of space. The Celestica scribes did their best to capture the moment, but their tablets and murals show a figure surrounded by a ring of light, a form that cannot be pinned down to any single identity. Was it Arceus, the original one from whose egg the universe was born, or was it one of its creations, the masters of time or space, appearing so powerful that they were mistaken for the creator? The question was never resolved, only inherited. The Diamond Clan would later insist it was the master of time, Dialga. The Pearl Clan would argue it was the master of space, Palkia, and the name Sinnoh itself was stretched to cover both meanings. The true nature of the blessing remained known only to the hero, his partners, and the being who granted it. The closer a people are to the divine, the less they feel the need to define it. The Celestica did not argue over the name of the god on the mountain. They simply lived in the peace it left behind. It was only later, when that peace became a distant memory, that the questions began in earnest, and the questions, over centuries, would become the faiths that defined Sinnoh for the rest of its history. But that was still far in the future, for now the hero descended the mountain. His work was done. The land was whole. The Celestica people continued their watch, the light of the summit fading slowly into the permanent twilight of history. Their society, built entirely around the presence of the divine, began its long, gentle dissolution. The temple fell silent. The ruins were reclaimed by the snow and the earth. The very memory of the hero and the blessing began to shift and soften over the centuries, waiting to be rediscovered by a new generation. A generation that would inherit a world shaped entirely by the choices made in that single, silent moment on the highest peak of the land. The blessing of the original one settled upon the ancient hero. Hisui was given a chance to heal, but the chaos that had gripped the land was not the only storm. A deeper shadow lurked at the edge of the world's memory. The oldest scriptures speak of another power rising from beyond ordinary understanding. The Celestica people did not speak its name lightly. They called it the Almighty Unknowable. This was not a term of defeat. It was a term of reverence for something that could not be fully comprehended by a mortal mind. This power did not rule over time or space. It belonged to something entirely different. At the dawn of creation, Arceus had brought forth three beings from the void. Dialga, who wove the fabric of time, Palkia, who stretched the canvas of space, and Giratina, who embodied antimatter, the counterpart to all that existed. Giratina was the shadow cast by light, the silence after a sound. When the universe took its ordered shape, Giratina was banished to a realm of pure distortion. The chronicles describe this home as a place where no place exists, a dimension folded in upon itself, where up is down and cause comes after effect. The physical connection to this realm is tenuous, but it can still be felt today. Far to the south of what was once Hisui, in a strange cave network known as Turnback Cave, and at the still waters of Send-Off Spring, the water there flows in reverse. The air feels heavier. The Griseous core, an orb of twisted matter, remains as a physical testament to this being, locked away deep in the distortion world. The evidence heavily points toward Giratina, but here, the ancient language refuses to make the answer simple. The old texts do not say the hero captured the renegade Pokémon. They do not say the hero banished it. The wording is strange. It is patient. It implies the hero had to simply witness it, to endure it. Finding this place was the first trial. It was not a journey across land. It was a journey out of reality. The plates of Arceus did not open the door. The hero had to find a place where the boundary between the world and its shadow was thin. Some say it was beneath the lake where Mesprit dwells. Others say the hero navigated the hidden caverns of the fabled spring. This is a place so deep that light itself cannot reach the bottom. The journey itself was a trial of the mind. The hero had to let go of everything that was known. Time became meaningless. Distance became meaningless. The only truth was the presence of the Almighty Unknowable. When the hero finally stood before the distortion, there was no battle. There was only a stillness, a silence deeper than space. This meant the hero faced a force that cannot be understood through strength alone. You cannot overpower the void. You cannot outrun distortion. No plate of Arceus could command this being. No blessing from the original one could silence the grumble of antimatter. The hero had to lay down the warrior's way. The hero had to stand in that nothing place and simply learn. What was the lesson learned in that place where gravity does not exist? In that stillness, the hero saw the world from the outside, saw the shape of creation and the wound where a piece of the universe had been torn away. The hero understood that the Almighty Unknowable was not evil. It was not a villain. It was a necessary opposite. The shadow that gives depth to light, the silence that gives meaning to sound. To face it was to face the completeness of the universe. The hero saw within the distortion the echoes of worlds that could have been, paths not taken, realities that collapsed before they were born. It was a graveyard of possibilities, and in that graveyard, the hero learned that the value of what exists is defined entirely by the shadow of what does not. The hero did not fight the almighty unknowable. The hero did not command it. The hero simply sat in its presence. The distortion swirled around, showing visions of time undone and space unraveled. It was a test of the self. The hero had to hold on to the memory of Hisui, the smell of the mountain air, the warmth of the 10 companions, the feeling of gratitude from the villagers. In the face of nothingness, the hero held on to everything. That was the victory. Not a battle won, but a self preserved. The almighty unknowable did not need to be conquered. It needed to be acknowledged. The hero understood that for the world to be complete, it must contain its opposite. Light cannot exist without shadow. Order cannot exist without chaos. Being cannot exist without non-being. The hero returned from that encounter changed entirely. The eyes of the hero held a new depth. The understanding of the world had shifted. This acceptance of duality became the deepest teaching of the Celestica people. It shaped their rituals. It shaped their art. It shaped their understanding of the very nature of the world. They built no temples to the almighty unknowable. There were no shrines. The lesson of the distortion world was too deep for stone and mortar. They carried it in their blood, in the stories they whispered, in the shadows they respected. They knew the darkness was not an enemy. It was the other half of the whole. The Celestica honoured the lesson through absence. They left gaps in their stonework. They played music with rests as long as the notes. They built their cities to mirror the sky, but always left one street unwalled, one path open to the wilderness. They remembered that the world is defined by the space uskand. This wisdom kept them balanced. It is perhaps why they were able to vanish so peacefully when their time came. It is a philosophy that echoes through time into the era of the Diamond and Pearl clans. The Diamond clan saw the world through the lens of time. The Pearl clan saw it through the lens of space. These two views seem like opposites, but the oldest wisdom knew that they were two sides of the same coin. The two clans argued over the nature of Almighty Sinnoh, but the oldest truth, buried deep in the ruins of the Celestica, was that no single name could capture the whole. The hero had learned that lesson in the distortion world. The hero knew that Dialga and Palkia were not the beginning or the end. They were simply two faces of a reality that included its own rejection. It is this very idea, this acceptance of the other, that would eventually lead to the healing of a region and the birth of a name that honoured both sides of an ancient divide. The legacy of the almighty unknowable is not one of fear. It is the understanding that the universe is vast enough to contain all things, even the things that seem to reject the universe itself. The being called the almighty unknowable has no counterpart in the world as we understand it. It belongs to a place that cannot be mapped, a territory that rejects the very rules that hold Hisui together. In the oldest stories passed down by the Celestica people, the domain of this being is described simply as a place where no place exists. The word that survives in the scattered records, the one that scholars point to when trying to identify this realm, is the domain of no place, and it belongs to Giratina. When Arceus created the universe, it gave form to three beings to govern the fundamental pillars of existence: Dialga, the master of time; Palkia, the master of space; and Giratina, the being of antimatter. While Dialga and Palkia were woven into the fabric of the reality we recognize, Giratina was placed outside it. It was charged with watching over a distorted version of existence, a realm of broken physics and inverted landscapes, the distortion world. This realm becomes the fearful opposite of Mount Coronet's ordered world. Mount Coronet anchors creation. It stands at the center of space and the origin of time. It is the pillar around which every direction on the continent of Hisui is measured. But the distortion world has no center and no edge. Where Coronet gives structure to direction and time, the distorted domain bends direction, distance, and certainty until they become meaningless. Gravity is a suggestion. Distance is a variable. Up and down lose their meaning. The ancient hero, after receiving the blessing of Arceus at the summit of Mount Coronet, was tasked with one final trial. He had calmed the land. He had gathered the plates. He had proven himself to the original one. But there was still a loose thread in the fabric of creation. The being that dwelled in the distortion world. The hero stepped into that realm as he had stepped into every trial before it, without weaponry intended for conquest, without a desire for domination. He carried only the plates, his 10 companions, and the blessing of the original one. It was not his strength that would see him through, but his understanding. The distortion world does not yield to force. It demands a different kind of navigation, a letting go of the familiar. The hero did not fight the distortion. He accepted it. He moved with it. And in that motion, Giratina recognized a reflection of its own existence, a being that could exist in 2 worlds without breaking. The hero confronted the unknowable and earned its acknowledgement rather than destroying it. And that acknowledgement changed nothing in the physical world, yet it changed everything. It meant that the balance between creation and its distorted mirror was maintained. It meant that the dangerous being, Giratina, was satisfied with the state of the worlds. Cradled in that acknowledgement, the dangerous being returned to its own domain. It did not vanish. It did not fade. It simply withdrew, leaving Hisui intact but forever unsettled. The distortion world continues to exist alongside our own, a constant reminder that the order we experience is fragile, that the rules of reality are a gift, not a given. When Giratina returned to the domain of no place, the hero returned to the mortal world. The people of Hisui could feel the shift. There was a deep silence after the storms, a certainty that the time of direct interaction with the creators was drawing to a close. The Lake Guardians returned to their lakes. The legendary Titans settled into their deep slumber. The noble Pokémon resumed their watch over the people of Hisui. But the memory of the distortion world, the place where no place exists, remained in the collective awareness of the Celestica people. They knew that the world was whole, only because the distortion world was separate, and they knew that the hero had walked through both. The time came for the hero to depart, and the Celestica people who had witnessed these events found themselves at a crossroads, with the light of the original one drawing away from their close experience. The question of what to do with this knowledge, this reverence, became the defining question of their age. The Celestica people began to withdraw. Their contact with the divine diminished as the generations passed. The ruins they left behind speak of a reverence that turned into memory. The Temple of Sinnoh itself, the structure raised atop Mount Coronet, was built to hold this memory. It was a monument to the bond between humanity, the Pokémon of Hisui, and the original one. But even temples weather with time. The certainty of the past begins to soften into the uncertainty of myth. And as the Celestica people gradually vanished from the land, their legacy was carried forward not by their physical presence, but by the stories they left carved in stone, the structures they built, and the peace they had cultivated with the Pokémon of the region. The memory of the hero, the Guardians, and the distortion world faded into the background of history, settling into the soil of the region that would one day be remembered by a new name, not Hisui, but Sinnoh. Mount Coronet is the pillar of the world in Hisui. It is the axis around which creation was shaped. We have spent the previous chapters observing the hero's climb, the meeting with the original one, and the battle with the unknowable. We have descended into the distortion world, where Giratina resides in a domain of no place, the dark mirror of the stable mountain. But now the story returns to the peak, the highest point in the land, where the Celestica people raised a permanent marker of their faith and their history. After the chaos was settled, after the hero and his 10 Pokémon were blessed by Arceus, the land finally knew a lasting peace. The enraged Pokémon calmed, the storms subsided, and in this quiet, the Celestica people looked upon the hero, his partners, and the mountain that had witnessed it all. They decided to build a monument, that would endure beyond any single lifetime. In honor of the hero, his Pokémon, and Arceus, a temple is built atop Mount Coronet. The temple is named for the being the hero encountered, the entity the clans would later call Almighty Sinnoh. The temple was not built for the clans. It was built by the Celestica, the original inhabitants of the land, who understood the difference between the creator and the created. For them, this temple honored the entire miracle of the age, the mortal who dared to gather the plates, the bonds he forged with 10 different species of Pokémon, and the divine creator who recognized his worth. This structure represents a true turning point in the history of the region. The Temple of Sinnoh becomes a monument to an age when myth and history overlapped. It is difficult for later generations, living in a world where Pokémon have become commonplace and the divine seems distant, to understand just how extraordinary this era was. In that age, a human could speak directly to the being that shaped the universe. A team of Pokémon could stand beside their trainer in the presence of a god. The temple captures this specific moment, freezing it in stone so that the memory would not simply dissolve into rumor and hearsay. Time, however, is patient. The Celestica people eventually left their mountain sanctuaries. They vanished from the historical record, leaving only their ruins scattered across the landscape. Their temple remained, a silent structure standing in the wind and snow at the summit of Coronet, but its full meaning began to fade. The rituals that were once performed there, the specific prayers that were spoken, the precise understanding of the events that took place on that mountain, all of it began to erode like the stone itself. Its stone walls preserve a version of the past that later generations can only partially read. If you could stand within the temple today, you would see the carvings. You could trace the outlines of the hero holding the plates. You could identify the 10 Pokémon that accompanied him. The shapes are there, clear in the fading light. But the full texture of that age, the living relationship between the people, the Pokémon, and the gods, is lost. You can see that a hero existed, but you cannot feel who he was. You can see that the 10 Pokémon were sacred, but you cannot know their names from the stone alone. The walls hold the outline of the truth, but the spirit that gave it breath has moved on. Only one fragment of that ancient story remained fully legible to those who came after. A single word carved into the temple itself survived the erosion of meaning. The temple's name quietly foreshadows the future name of the entire region, the name Sinnoh, the word the clans found for them. Travel down from the summit would eventually travel down of the land and become the banner under which the descendants of the clans would live. It is a fascinating detail of history. The word Sinnoh was a label for the divine, but its meaning was not perfectly preserved. The Diamond clan believed it represented Dialga, the master of time. The Pearl clan believed it represented Palkia, the master of space. They argued over the nature of their god, while the temple stood above them, holding a truth that was larger than either interpretation. The temple's name survived, but its context was adapted and reshaped by the new inhabitants of the land. Hisui faded into the past. Sinnoh rose in its place. The ancient temple sat above it all, watching the ages pass, its name woven into the identity of the land itself. The Temple of Sinnoh was not an ending. It was a monument raised at the very peak of an age, a testament etched in stone on the highest slopes of Mount Coronet, a memory made permanent of the bond between the ancient hero, the 10 loyal partners at his side, and the original one who blessed them. But no civilization holds its peak forever. The golden thread of that age was always meant to fray, and so the Celestica people eventually disappear from Hisui's wider history. Their path out of the world is not a sudden catastrophe, at least not one that has left a clear scar in the archaeological record. There are no layers of ash, no signs of a final battle. Instead, their old accounts say, the light of Almighty Sinnoh faded from their lives. This is the only explanation their ruins offer, a sacred illumination that sustained their entire understanding of the world. A direct connection to the deep order of time and space, simply dimmed Whether it was a natural cycle returning the world to a quieter, less mythic phase, or a consequence of something shifting far beneath the surface of reality. Their own histories fall silent at this threshold. What remains are the deep and quiet questions, whether the Celestica departed entirely, sailing to lands beyond the known coast, or whether they slowly declined as their connection to the divine weakened over generations, or whether they became gradually absorbed into new peoples who began to find their way into the valleys of Hisui, remains entirely unresolved. There is no single answer carved into the final tablets. What is known is that their ruins remain behind as the region's oldest unanswered question. The strange markings at the Salassian ruins, the fragmented walls of the fabled spring, the deep chambers of the Clamberclaw cliffs, all of them hold the silent memory of a people who knew the heartbeat of the world in a way no one after them could fully grasp. They built a temple to their god and their hero, and then they faded into the landscape from which they came, leaving their stone monuments to weather the centuries alone. Their story stops here at the edge of memory, but Hisui itself continued. The mountains and the lakes remained exactly as they were, the old runes weathered under the same sky, waiting for new eyes to read their meaning. And eventually, others did arrive on the shores of Hisui, carrying their own deep beliefs about the light that had once shone so brightly, and why it had to fade. Those who arrived carried with them stories of a world torn by strife, where the balance of nature was fragile. They saw the ruins of the Celestica not as relics of a lost golden age, but as warnings from a time when mortals reached too high. Some believed that the light of Almighty Sinnoh had been withdrawn because humanity had failed to honour the limits placed before it. Others believed the Celestica had been punished for standing too close to the divine. In time, these fears became traditions, and traditions became the foundation for new ways of life. The people who settled in Hisui learned to live beneath Mount Coronet's shadow. Without claiming to understand it, they gave reverence to the forces that shaped their land. The sun that warmed the fields, the vastness of space above, a flow of time that carried every living thing toward its end. Yet even as their beliefs changed, fragments of the older faith endured. The name Sinnoh remained sacred. The oldest ruins were still approached with caution. Strange Pokémon associated with the ancient temple were remembered in stories, though their true roles were obscured by generations of retelling. What had once been a clear account of the original one, the ancient hero and the 10 noble partners, became a scattered inheritance. Pieces survived in songs, others endured in symbols. Some were carried forward by families who could no longer explain why a certain carving, a certain prayer, or a certain mountain path mattered. This was how the memory of Celestica passed into the age that followed, not as history in the modern sense, but as myth. A myth powerful enough to shape the people of Hisui, even when its origins had been almost entirely forgotten. And among those later peoples, 2 great traditions would emerge. One looked to the endless reach of space and found its truth in the vast blue sky. The other looked to the movement of time and found its truth in the steady passage of the sun. The Diamond Clan and the Pearl Clan would each preserve part of an older understanding, while disagreeing over the meaning of the god who stood beyond both. Neither side possessed the whole story. Perhaps no one could. The truth had been broken apart long before their clans took root, but their devotion revealed something important. The light that had faded from the lives of the Celestica had not vanished completely. It had survived as an ember beneath the ashes of memory, waiting for the moment when Hisui would once again stand at the centre of a divine conflict. I hope you're as amazed by this as I am. If you want to stay updated on more content like this, make sure to subscribe and join our community of curious minds. Trust me, what's coming next will challenge everything you thought you knew. When the Celestica people vanished from Hisui, it would be easy to assume that their entire world faded into silence, but not every trace of the Celestica vanishes with the civilization itself. In the remote highlands, a descendant named Kogita preserves ancient knowledge that others dismiss as legend. She lives in a small settlement that clings to the old ways, holding on to accounts of a time when Almighty Sinnoh's light was a living presence. Most consider her tales mere folklore, but she knows they carry the weight of a lost world. Volo too is a descendant of the Celestica, and he inherits both Celestica memory and a dangerous obsession with divine truth. His quest for understanding drives him to explore the deepest ruins and the oldest texts. He seeks not just knowledge, but a confrontation with the very forces that shaped reality. His passion borders on recklessness as he peers into truths that others dare not touch. Together, their existence reveals that the lost world never completely disappeared. It endures in the knowledge they carry, in the traditions they uphold. The Celestica may have withdrawn from history, but their legacy continues through these descendants. In their words and actions, the ancient world finds a way to persist, a quiet echo that shapes the present from the shadows of the past. This lineage of remembrance and obsession flows through the region, influencing how myths are preserved and how the divine is understood. And as these stories are carefully kept and occasionally pondered, the lost world remains woven into the fabric of time, never fully apart from the world that followed. The teachings that Kogita passes down are not merely stories. They are lessons in understanding the natural world and the forces that govern it. She speaks of the importance of balance, of the harmony that existed when Sinnoh's light was present. Volo, on the other hand, is obsessed with the mechanics of creation. He delves into forbidden lore, believing that by understanding the gods, he can grasp the essence of reality itself. His journey takes him to the edge of sanity, but it also brings to light secrets that have been buried for millennia. These two figures embody the struggle between acceptance and ambition. Kogita finds peace and preservation, while Volo seeks power through knowledge. Yet both are essential to keeping the Celestica spirit alive. Their actions ripple through the region, influencing scholars and adventurers alike. The myths they uphold are not just relics of the past, but living forces that shape the future. As time passes, their efforts ensure that the lost world is never truly lost. It exists in the patterns of the land, in the traditions of the people, and in the hearts of those who remember. The Celestica may have vanished, but their essence permeates everything. Through Kogita and Volo, that essence continues to speak, guiding those who are willing to listen. Consider the weight of these traditions as they pass from one generation to the next. Kogita's voice carries the authority of ages, each word a bridge to a time when the divine walked among mortals. She recounts tales of creation and conflict, of how the land was shaped, and how the people learned to live in accordance with the natural order. Volo, meanwhile, translates these tales into action. He scours the ancient sites, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that could redefine everything known about the world. Their work is not without consequence. The knowledge they uncover attracts attention, both from those who seek to preserve it and those who wish to exploit it. But through it all, the core truth remains. The Celestica were not mere inhabitants of Hisui. They were custodians of a profound understanding of the universe. Their disappearance was not an end, but a transformation, a shift in the fabric of reality that allowed other forms of life to flourish. Yet, for those who carry their blood, the connection remains unbroken. Kogita feels it in the stillness of the morning, when the mist rises and the world seems held in a breath. Volo senses it in the depths of caverns, where ancient runes glow with residual energy. Together, they are the keepers of a flame that refuses to die. This flame illuminates the path for others. Scholars begin to piece together the history from their findings, and the public fascination with the Celestica grows. The legends are no longer dismissed as fantasy, but are studied as vital records of a bygone era. Through this renewed interest, the lost world gains a second life, influencing art, culture, and spirituality in the region. Kogita's patience and Volo's fervor are two sides of the same coin. One preserves while the other probes, but both are driven by the same force, an unyielding love for the truth of their heritage. In their own ways, they ensure that the Celestica story continues to be told, not as a static relic, but as a living narrative that evolves with each retelling. And so the echo of the ancient world grows louder. It calls to those who are willing to step off the beaten path and explore the mysteries of existence. The Celestica may have vanished, but in their descendants, they have given the world a gift, the courage to remember, and the wisdom to seek. Cogita holds the knowledge of a world that no longer walks the earth. Her records speak of the Celestica, of their temple atop the world, of the ancient hero and his journey. But for everyone else in Hisui, these are stories without weight. They are legends passed around a fire, becoming thinner and more fantastical with every telling. The physical evidence remains. The ruins of the Celestica dot the landscape. Stone arches that frame empty skies. Doorways that open onto sheer cliffs. Plazas where the paving stones are split by ancient ice and root. The Celestica left behind more than just stones. They left behind a silence that has a weight of its own. The new settlers walk through these spaces and feel a hush fall over their own voices. The ruins demand a certain reverence, even if the reason for that reverence has been forgotten. Centuries later, new communities live among ruins whose builders they barely understand. They come from distant places, seeking space, seeking safety, seeking a land that is not yet claimed in any way that feels real to them. They find a land that is already full of memory. They raise their wooden walls against the stone remnants of the past. They do not know the names of the builders. They do not understand their carvings, their crests, their purpose. A mural on a wall might be a prayer, a warning, or a simple portrait. To the new settlers, it is simply old. It is simply a ruin. And so they build their lives around it, over it, against it. They are inhabitants of a palimpsest, writing their story on a page that was never fully erased. And the Pokémon of Hisui, they are not the gentle partners of the ancient stories. The bond between human and Pokémon was a gift of a specific time, a covenant sealed by a hero who gathered the plates. That hero is gone. His partners have scattered to their domains, or perhaps they wait as guardian spirits. But the average fur or feather on the plains has no reason to trust a human. The Ursaring of the forests have learned to avoid humans. But a mother protecting her cub will tear down a wooden wall without hesitation. The Bibarel in the rivers build dams that flood the lowland fields. The settlers learn to live in a world they do not control. They learn to read the warnings of a Yanma's wing, the sudden stillness of the forest when a Rapidash herd is near. Every creature is a symbol of a power they cannot command. They build shrines not to the gods of time and space, but to the local Pokémon lords, hoping to appease the spirits that guard the passes. It is a faith born of necessity, not of love. A Shinx knows that a human means a snare. A Luxray watches from the tree line, and the hunter feels the weight of a gaze that holds a long memory of broken trust. Humans and Pokémon remain wary of one another, shaped by generations of fear. The land vibrates with this tension. Every trip to the river is a negotiation. Every settlement is a fortress. Every shadow hides a potential threat or a potential ally, and nothing is certain except the distance that has grown where once there was closeness. The land is still called Hisui, but its old spiritual center remains Mount Coronet. The mountain is not just a landmark, it is a climate, it is a god. Its shadow falls across the fields and dictates the length of the day. The rivers that nourish the crops all flow from its snowmelt. The wind that carries the winter comes down from its peaks. The settlers name their villages after its features. They orient their maps by its slopes. Every journey is a story about crossing its high passes or skirting its deep forests. The Temple of Sinnoh sits at the peak, but it is unreachable for most. It is a rumour on the wind, a point of light glimpsed through the clouds. It is proof that something greater than their small lives exists, watching over them from a height they cannot attain. They call it the Temple of Sinnoh, because that is the name that drifted down from the old stories. They do not know what Sinnoh is. They just know the mountain feels holy, feels old, feels like the heart of something they cannot name. And it is this very unknowing that gives birth to the future. Scattered around the base of Mount Coronet, separated by its high ridges and the long valleys that radiate from it, the new communities begin to form their own spiritual traditions. They look at the same mountain, they feel the same presence, but the eastern settlements feel it as a pulse, a steady rhythm of now and later, of cause and effect. The western settlements feel it as an expanse, an infinite canvas of here and there. They inhabit different worlds. On the eastern side, the sunlight rises over the sea and strikes the mountain first. The days are measured by the sharp line of the shadow on the slope. Time feels rigid, predictable, something that can be tracked by the movement of light. On the western side, the land rolls out into misty valleys and hidden lakes. The horizon is soft. The boundaries are blurred. Space feels fluid, expansive. When they speak of the divine, the Eastern tradition speaks of a being that exists within every tick of the clock, every turning season. The Western tradition speaks of a being that exists in the space between the stars, the hollow of a cave, the depth of a pool. They give it different names. They carve different symbols into their clothes and banners. They tell different stories around their fires. The stage is set for rival traditions to interpret the same divine mystery in different ways. One tradition sees a diamond, the unbreakable order of time. Another sees a pearl, the boundless potential of space. Neither is wrong, but both are incomplete, and neither knows it. They do not realize they are describing the same vast mystery. They only know that their way feels true, and the other feels strange. And so the seeds of the Diamond and Pearl clans are planted not in hatred, but in the simple geography of belief. The mystery of Sinnoh has not been solved. It has only been lived. The settlers live in the ruins of a civilization that understood it, and they try to rebuild that understanding from the fragments. One fragment is a diamond, one fragment is a pearl, one is a feather, a plate, a lake. The land holds all the pieces. The people hold only the ones they are ready to see. And so the world of Hisui settles into a long, quiet equilibrium of fear and reverence, of seeking and not finding. The mountain waits. The ruins wait. The Pokémon watch from the shadows of the old walls. The story is far from over, but for now, this is the shape it takes. A people living in an old land, shaping a new belief from the echoes of a forgotten one. The fear that shaped the early days of the new settlers in Hisui did not define every community equally. While many kept their distance from the wild Pokémon, praying for safety behind walls built from ancient ruins, one clan chose a different path. They chose to understand. The Diamond clan looked at the world around them and saw not chaos, but rhythm. They did not cower from the passage of time. They revered it. The Diamond clan identified Almighty Sinnoh with Dialga, the Master of Time. For them, the great power that shaped the world was not a static mountain or a blind force of nature. It was the very principle that allowed a seed to become a tree. It was the force that brought morning after night, autumn after summer. To them, time is the greatest gift that life could receive. It is the only force that truly allows the world to continue and to change. Without it, nothing could grow, nothing could heal, and nothing could be forgotten. This deep respect for the passing of moments shaped their entire philosophy. Their beliefs emphasized living fully in the present, rather than fearing what comes next. If the future was simply another point on a line that Dialga held in perfect order, there was no sense in dreading it. The present moment was a gift to be lived with intention, not a hurdle to be rushed past. This gave the members of the Diamond clan a remarkable resilience. They could endure hardship because they understood that hardship was just a single moment in a long and continuous river. Their devotion is sincere. You can see it in the way they speak to their partner Pokémon. You can hear it in the rituals they hold beneath the open sky. Their settlements followed the rhythm of the sun. Their harvests were timed to the turning of leaves. They built their entire world around the idea that time is sacred. And yet their god is not the whole truth. Dialga is real. Dialga is powerful. But Dialga is not the singular creator spirit that the mortal world calls Almighty Sinnoh. The Diamond Clan caught a glimpse of something vast and infinite, but they focused their worship on just one of its radiant faces. Their commitment was not diminished by this misunderstanding. If anything, it made their love for their beliefs more human. They saw a fragment of the divine and built a beautiful world around it. But time does not exist in a vacuum. For every moment, there must be a place where it happens. For every beat of a heart, there must be a chest to contain it. Just as the Diamond Clan defined their world through the flow of time, the other great community of that ancient age looked upon the exact same land and reached a different yet equally profound conclusion. They looked at the vastness of the sky, the distance between the lakes, the sheer volume of the world that holds all of these moments together. They saw the space that contained the time. The Pearl Clan believed that Almighty Sinnoh revealed itself through Palkia, the master of space, where the Diamond Clan found meaning in the movement of the seasons. The Pearl Clan found meaning in the endless expanse that surrounded them. Space was not emptiness, it was possibility. It was the distance between one village and another, the stretch of forest between a traveller and home, the open sky that made every horizon feel like a promise. To them, space was the foundation upon which all life depended. A living thing needed room to breathe, room to walk, room to become what it was meant to be. Without space, there could be no journey, no discovery, no meeting between strangers. The world was vast because it was meant to be explored. Every mountain trail, every hidden cavern, every distant shore was proof that Almighty Sinnoh had given humanity a place within something immeasurably larger than itself. This belief shaped the Pearl Clan's character. They valued freedom, movement, and the courage to step into the unknown. They understood that the world could be dangerous, but they did not believe danger should make a person small. To live was to venture outward. To grow was to cross the boundaries that fear tried to draw around the heart. Their reverence for Palkia was reflected in the places they chose to live. Their settlement stood among the wide and rugged reaches of the tundra, where the land opened beneath an enormous sky. In that cold and distant landscape, there was nowhere to hide from the scale of the world. The wind carried across the snow without obstruction. The stars seemed close enough to touch. Every glance toward the horizon was a reminder that existence extended far beyond the limits of any single person, clan, or tradition. Like the Diamond Clan, the Pearl Clan had touched upon a genuine divine truth. Palkia was no false god. Its power over space was real, ancient, and beyond mortal comprehension, but their understanding remained incomplete. They had mistaken one great aspect of creation for the creator itself. They saw the vessel that held the universe and gave it a name worthy of worship, never realizing that the force Almighty Sinnoh stood beyond both space and time. This difference did not make either clan foolish. It made them tragic in the gentlest sense of the word. Two peoples looked upon the same divine mystery and found different answers. One saw time, one saw space. Neither could fully understand why the other believed as they did, because each had built an entire way of life around the truth they had discovered, and between them stood Hisui itself, a land where ancient powers slept beneath mountain peaks and within the depths of sacred lakes. A land where the boundary between myth and reality was thinner than anyone realized. While the Diamond Clan believes in the sacred thread of time, the Pearl Clan finds their faith in the canvas upon which that thread is woven. The world around them is not just a series of moments, it is a vast living expanse. This is the core of their understanding, the lens through which they see the whole of creation. The Pearl Clan identifies Almighty Sinnoh with Palkia, the master of space. To them, space is the greatest gift. It is not an absence of things. It is the room, the generous allowance that allows all lives to exist together. Without this space, there can be no motion, no growth, no change. Time itself cannot have meaning without something to act upon. For the Pearl Clan, that something is the vast, living world around them. This fundamental belief leads to a profound sense of humility. Their beliefs emphasize the vastness of the world and the humility of small creatures within it. Look up at the stars in the night sky, they might say. Gaze across the sea that stretches beyond any horizon you have ever seen. Walk the length of the alabaster icelands and feel the wind on your face, knowing it has touched places you will never see. You are not the master of this space. You are a guest within it, a very small guest, blessed with the opportunity to exist for a brief moment in a universe that has existed for an eternity of eternities. This is not meant to diminish you, but to free you. When you accept your small size in the grand order of things, the pressure of trying to control the uncontrollable falls away. For the Pearl Clan, freedom is found in this acceptance. The space they worship is not empty. It is filled with the presence of the divine. Every valley, every river, every silent peak is a part of the body of their god. To walk through the world is to walk through the sacred. And so they move with care, with attention, with a reverence for the boundaries that space itself creates. A river is not just an obstacle to cross. It is a boundary set by Almighty Sinnoh, a line in the universe that should not be crossed lightly. A mountain is not just a climb. It is a place that touches the sky, a place that exists in a layer of reality closer to the divine than the ground below. When a Pearl Clan member travels from one settlement to another, they do not merely cross distance, they cross the sacred space of their god. Every step is a prayer, every rest is a meditation. They sleep under the stars, feeling the vastness above them, and they wake knowing they are held within a world that has no edges, only horizons. Their nobles are powerful, but they are not treated as masters in the sense of dominance over the land. They are guardians of a domain. Lord Avalug commands the frozen wastes of the Alabaster Icelands. Lady Lilligant watches over the blossoming fields, the Coronet Highlands. Each noble is a fixed point in a sea of infinite space, an anchor for the world's order. The Pearl Clan does not seek to conquer these points. They seek to coexist with them, to maintain the balance of the territories that were given to them both by the grace of Almighty Sinnoh. To them, the great Pokémon of the domain are the living edges of space itself, defining a place by their presence within it. It is easy to see how this faith mirrors the devotion of the Diamond Clan, while simultaneously keeping the two groups apart. Both clans recognize a single creator, a single source of all things. They both call it Almighty Sinnoh, but their focus fractures the divine image into two distinct halves. One clan sees the progression of time as the ultimate principle of the universe. The other sees the expanse of space as the ultimate container of existence. This is not a small disagreement. It defines their entire interpretation of reality. The Diamond Clan marks time. They have a calendar, a schedule, prayers for the morning and for the evening, rituals tied to the seasons. The Pearl Clan marks space. They have territories, sacred grounds that must not be trod upon, and an understanding that to be in the right place is more important than being there at the right time. This difference can be felt in the way the two clans structure their lives. The Diamond Clan builds to last, their settlements designed for the long passage of time. The Pearl Clan builds to fit, their structures settling lightly upon the land, ready to be moved if the spirit of the space demands it. Their wardens are not just keepers of schedules, but guardians of vast domains. The space given to the noble Pokémon under their care is an extension of the sacred space created by Palkia. When a warden tends to their lord, they are maintaining the balance of a fragment of infinite space. They are ensuring that the boundaries between the wild and the tame, between the human world and the world of Pokémon, remain stable and respected. The leader of the Pearl Clan, in the time of the events we know best, was Irida. Her name is not just a title. It represents the cold, clear light of the northern lands, the vastness of the sky at dawn. Her philosophy was one of quiet strength. She did not command her people to action. She provided them the space to find their own path. She understood that space is not just the absence of control, but the presence of trust. To give space is to respect the other. This is the highest lesson of the Pearl Clan. To exist without crowding, to live without dominating, to be part of the world without trying to own it. And so the Pearl Clan walks the snowy lands of Hisui with a different step than their neighbours. They are not racing against time. They are dwelling within space. They trace the edges of the highlands. They know the secret paths of the lowlands. They feel the cold embrace of the icelands as a familiar place. Their faith does not promise them a future. It promises them a place in the infinite, a corner of the universe that is theirs to inhabit, not as conquerors, but as caretakers. They are the silence between the notes, the pause between the breaths, the empty canvas that holds the possibility of everything. The space the Pearl Clan revered so deeply was alive. It was not merely the absence of matter, it was the potential for all matter. It was the generosity of a god who created room, who pulled back the darkness to make a place for light, who dug out the lakes to make a home for water. For the Pearl Clan, the act of creation is an act of giving space, and the highest form of devotion is to honor that gift by living gracefully within the boundaries that space provides. This is the world of the Pearl Clan, a world of infinite room and of the quiet, humble creatures who inhabit it. The land they walked held the memory of its making. Every mountain was a gesture, every lake was a purpose. The silence of the space was not an empty silence. It was full of the living truth of Almighty Sinnoh, a truth that would speak in its own time, within its own space. The Pearl Clan finds the meaning of existence in the space between things, the room to grow, the wideness of the world. The Diamond Clan finds its meaning in the steady beat of time, the rhythm of seasons, the continuity of bloodlines. Both clans worship Almighty Sinnoh. Both clans are utterly devoted and completely sincere. Neither of them is visualizing the same god. Diamond and Pearl worship the same title while imagining entirely different beings. The word Sinnoh becomes a shared prayer, but the image behind the prayer is a reflection of the clan itself. When a Pearl Clan elder speaks of the space that cradles all life, they see Palkia, the master of that infinite dimension. When a Diamond Clan child learns about the flow that carries all moments, they see Dialga, the arbiter of time. The title is a window, and each clan looks through it into a completely different room. This is not a simple disagreement over a name. It is a fundamental difference in the way they perceive reality itself. The very shape of their faith determines how they raise their children, how they choose their leaders, how they approach a wild Pokémon. For the Diamond Clan, a Pokémon is a creature of its season, its life a story from beginning to end, a thread in the great tapestry of time. For the Pearl Clan, a Pokémon is a creature of its niche, a point in a boundless network, a piece of the great puzzle of space. This disagreement turns theology into rivalry. Even as both clans seek harmony with Pokémon, it is a war of rituals, not soldiers. Both clans strive for balance, but they are balancing different equations. The Diamond Clan maintains the schedule of the land, honoring the first lightning of spring, the turning of the leaves, the precise moment of the solstice. The Pearl Clan maintains the geography of the land, honoring the widest expanse of a summer sky, the deepest point of a lake, the sacred boundary of a territory. One tends to the heartbeat, the other tends to the lungs. They live in the same land, but they worship in different temples, built from the same mountain stone. A Diamond Clan member might offer a prayer for the duration of a hunt. A Pearl Clan member might offer a prayer for the range of a herd. The nobles themselves, the great Pokémon blessed by the ancient hero, are seen through this dual lens of faith. And what of the being behind the veil? The name Almighty Sinnoh becomes a veil covering Dialga, Palkia Arceus, and older myths. It is a word that has become a sanctuary for doubt within faith. The Celestica, who knew the Creator directly, left no single clear name for the absolute beginning. Arceus is a whisper, a title found on ancient plates, a presence felt in the silence far above the mountain. The clans adopted the broader title. Sinnoh is safer for that way. It allows them to agree on the existence of the divine, without completely agreeing on its specific nature. This is the secret strength of their culture and the root of its persistent division. They are united by their devotion, but separated by the object of it. The word holds everything. It holds the ticking clock. It holds the boundless stage. It holds the silent creator beyond both. It is as if the clans are looking at the hands of the clock, while the Celestica looked at the clockmaker. The region's future identity is born from this beautiful and persistent misunderstanding. When the time comes for the land itself to be named, the old name of Hisui is laid aside. The settlers who arrived, who lived among the clans, who saw their devotion, did not demand a verdict on the true nature of the god. The newcomers could not settle the theological argument between the clans, so they did something remarkable. They honored the source of the unity, the name itself. The wild land of the Celestica became Sinnoh, the name of the shared god. It is a name that holds the tension of its history. It is a name that asks a question without demanding an answer. It is a gift from a divided past to a unified future, a monument to a mystery that no one could solve, a promise that it is okay not to have the final answer as long as you have the faith. This was the spiritual foundation of the world. Before the great waves of settlers arrived, a world balanced between the tick of a clock and the edge of a horizon. The clans held their faith close, but the world is wide, and the ancient mountain's call was too powerful to remain a secret. Beyond the fog of the past, beyond the stormy seas, new sails appeared on the horizon. They carried people who did not know the whispers of the Celestica, who did not bow to Dialga or Paldea as the clans did. They carried a different kind of faith, a faith in control, in order, in the power of human hands to shape a wild land. They brought iron and ambition. The age of the clans, the age of pure faith in the divine of the mountain, was about to meet the dawn of progress, and the mountain watched, as it always had, waiting to see what the newcomers would find in its shadow. The Diamond and Pearl clans could agree on very little. They shared the land of Hisui, but they saw the world through entirely different lenses. The Diamond clan looked at the flow of time as the ultimate expression of almighty Sinnoh. For them, every season, every sunrise, every moment of change was a prayer offered to the master of time. The Pearl clan in turn saw the divine in the vastness of space itself, the empty canvas of the sky, the distance between stars, the room that allowed all living things to exist together. This was their sacred truth. Their disagreement was not born of malice, but of a deep, genuine reverence for a power they could sense, but never fully explain. Both clans prayed to the same name, but they imagined entirely different gods looking back at them. And yet, for all their careful traditions and quiet devotion, neither clan could have predicted the true shape of the legend that was about to unfold across their land. For the story of Hisui was not a closed book. It was a living cycle, waiting for the right moment to turn once more. That moment would arrive not from the mountains, not from the lakes, but from a tear in the sky above the wilds. Around 3 centuries before the events of Diamond and Pearl, a disturbance splits the heavens above the Hisui region. The sky flashes with an unnatural, shimmering light. A rift, a glowing, jagged tear in the very fabric of reality, opens without warning, spilling radiant energy across the land. The Pokémon below are startled. The clans look up with a mixture of fear and reverence, and from this rift a figure falls, a traveller, not from another country, but from a time and a place entirely removed from this ancient world. They arrive with no memory of how they got there, carrying only a strange device known as the Arc Phone, a mysterious relic that seems to pulse with a connection to the divine. They are found by Professor Laventon, a man of science from the Galaxy Expedition team, a group of settlers who have only just begun to carve a home out of this wild peninsula. This traveller, who comes to be known as Ray or Akari, is taken in by the team at their struggling settlement on the coast of the Obsidian Fieldlands. The Galaxy team's headquarters, which will one day grow into Jubilife Village, is barely more than a collection of tents, a few wooden buildings, and a whole lot of determination. Every single day is a struggle for survival. Food must be carefully foraged from the surrounding fields. Walls must be built to keep out the wild Pokémon. The team members are brave, but they are stretched thin. They came to Hisui seeking a new beginning, but they found a land that does not easily surrender its secrets. The air is cold. The forests are deep and filled with danger. The banks of Lake Verity hold their own silent mysteries. The Galaxy team represents progress. But in this ancient land, progress is a slow and difficult path. And then there are the nobles. Massive, powerful Pokémon, revered by the Diamond and Pearl clans as sacred protectors of the land. They are the direct descendants of the 10 companions, who accompanied the ancient hero of Seska's legend. The beings who helped gather the plates of Arceus from across Hisui in the distant past. In the time of the Celestica, these noble Pokémon were gentle guardians, keeping the balance between the wild and the civilized. They accepted offerings at sacred shrines. They guided lost travelers. But now, a strange and volatile energy courses through them. A frenzied storm roils within their bodies. Lightning strikes from clear skies. The rivers flood without rain. The very ground trembles without explanation. The noble Pokémon, the Lady of the Ridge, the Lord of the Hollow, the Lady of the Frost, and others, rampage across their territories, driven by a mysterious force that threatens to tear the land apart. The ancient hero once faced a world of lightning and disorder. Now the same chaos has returned to Hisui. The old cycle begins again. A human must step forward to restore the trust between Pokémon, people, and the divine. And that human is the one who fell from the sky. Professor Laventon will teach them how to capture Pokémon and study them. The clan leaders, Adamon of the Diamond Clan and Irida of the Pearl Clan, will test their character and their hearts. The Wardens, the human guardians of the individual noble Pokémon, will guide the traveller through the wilds, teaching them the old ways of respect and offering. The traveller must gather the plates of Arceus, calm the raging nobles, and prove that humanity is still worthy of the blessing of Almighty Sinnoh. The Age of Legends has returned, not as a distant memory, but as a living, breathing mission. What does it mean for a legend to repeat itself across the centuries? The Celestica people constructed magnificent ruins across Hisui. The Solucian ruins, the fabled spring, mysterious temples hidden within the mountains. They understood the ancient language of the Pokémon. They walked alongside the divine as equals, and then, for reasons that remain partially unknown, they vanished, leaving only echoes of their profound knowledge in the stones and artifacts they left behind. The Diamond and Pearl clans inherited the worship of Almighty Sinnoh, but the truth of the divine had become fragmented by time and interpretation. The Galaxy team brought tools, ambition, and a scientific mindset, but they lacked the deep, intuitive wisdom of the land and the creatures that had lived there for millennia. The world of Hisui was fragmented, divided by fear, by misunderstanding, by the sheer difficulty of surviving in such an untamed place. The frenzy of the noble Pokémon is a symptom of this broken connection. The progenitor, Arceus, watches from its domain beyond space and time. The Lake Guardians, Uxie, Azelf, and Mesprit, hold the keys to knowledge, willpower, and emotion, the very building blocks of consciousness and trust. If the traveller can awaken the bonds between people and Pokémon, they can heal the rift between the land and the sky. But if they fail, the light of Almighty Sinnoh will fade, and Hisui will remain locked in an eternal age of chaos and fear. The weight of the world rests on the shoulders of a single soul who did not choose this fate, but who must carry it nonetheless. The Galaxy Expedition team will look to the traveller for their survival. The Diamond and Pearl clans will look to them for answers to their oldest questions. The noble Pokémon will offer their respect only after a trial of strength and understanding. A battle that must be fought with skill, with courage, and with the help of the Pokémon who choose to stand by their side. But beneath all of these tasks, a deeper pulse beats beneath the earth of Hisui. The plates of Arceus are scattered across the continent, waiting to be found. The 3 legendary Pokémon of creation, Dialga, the Master of Time, Palkia, the Master of Space, and the banished Giratina, ruler of the Distortion World, stir in their separate domains. The rift in the sky is not just an incidental anomaly. It is a deliberate portal, a doorway to the very origin of all things. The traveller is guided by a voice that echoes across the boundaries of time, a voice that may very well be the will of Arceus itself, reaching out from the moment of creation to guide the cycle one more time. The test is not just to tame the wilds of Hisui, it is to prove that the covenant of trust can hold, that the bond between humans and Pokémon is strong enough to withstand the distortions of time, the vastness of space, and the gravity of antimatter. The old cycle has begun, and the path ahead is carved into the very foundation of the world, waiting to be walked by the one who fell from the sky. Around 300 years before the time of Diamond and Pearl, a traveller falls from a rift in the sky. This is the age that will come to be known as the time of Legends Arceus. The Galaxy Expedition team struggles to build a home in an unforgiving land. The clans watch from their settlements, and a quiet merchant moves between them all, a smile on his face and a heavy book tucked under his arm. His name is Volo, and he carries secrets far older than any village in Hisui. Volo is not what he appears. He looks at the world around him and does not see a place of wonder or a gift from the Almighty. He sees a flawed creation, a rough draft of reality that was left unfinished. He believes it can be made right. Volo seeks Arceus not merely for knowledge, but to remake a world he sees as deeply and irreparably broken. The chaos of the rift, the struggle between the clans, the fear that separates humans and Pokémon. He views all of these as proof that the original architect made terrible mistakes, and he believes he is the one to correct them. How does a simple merchant come to hold such a profound and dangerous conviction? His lineage provides the answer. Volo is a descendant of the Celestica people, the very first inhabitants of Hisui, who vanished long ago, leaving behind only ruins and ancient texts. While the Diamond and Pearl clans offer prayers to an almighty Sinnoh they cannot fully define, Volo reads the old scripts. His Celestica heritage gives him access to truths forgotten by nearly everyone else. He knows the true name of the original one. He knows of the 18 ancient plates. He knows the story of the first hero. He sees himself not as a student of history, but as its inheritor. In his search for these older truths, he does not walk alone. He encounters a presence that no one else has truly understood. Deep in a twisted realm of shadow and gravity, a being of immense power feels his call. This is Giratina, the third of the creation trio, the one cast out by Arceus. It was given no temple, no worship, no peaceful lake. It exists in a state of perfect exile. Giratina becomes his ally, drawn into a plan shaped by resentment and longing. Together, they form a pact born of quiet fury and a desperate hope that the world can be set right, even if it must first be torn down to its foundation. With Giratina's power behind him, Volo begins to gather the plates. He manipulates the clans. He studies the Galaxy team. He follows the young traveller who fell from the rift. He almost succeeds. He forges the red chain. He captures the power of the Lake Guardians. He climbs to the summit of Mount Coronet and stands at the temple built for the ancient hero. He waits for Arceus to appear, fully believing he will be chosen to take the place of the creator. The final conflict reveals how dangerous ancient knowledge becomes when compassion is removed from it. Volo stands ready. He has the history, the lineage, the birthright. His logic is perfect. But when he is faced with the stubborn loyalty of a trainer and their Pokémon, his plan begins to crumble. He is calculated for every variable except the unspoken bond of trust. He cannot simulate mercy. He cannot manipulate a connection that is freely given. He dismisses these bonds as weakness, but in truth they are a power he can never wield. His fortress of information is breached by something as simple as a Pokémon choosing to stay by its trainer's side. In his quest to become a god, Volo forgot how to be a friend, and for that, the world he tried to claim slips through his fingers. He is left standing alone on the cold summit. Giratina retreats, its dream of a new world broken. The 18 plates scatter across the land. The plan is finished. Volo vanishes from history, his name reduced to a dusty rumour, his ambition nothing but a cautionary tale carved into the ruins he once studied. With Volo gone, the immediate crisis in Hisui passes. The rift is sealed. The clans begin to find their balance. The work of mending the bonds between people and Pokémon can truly begin. The stories of the hero are told once more, and the people of this ancient land, for the first time in a long while, begin to look toward the future instead of being haunted by the past. The work of building a lasting home, the work of creating the region that will one day be known as Sinnoh, can finally proceed. Volo's plan was stopped. The sky above Mount Coronet closed, the rift sealing seamlessly once more. Dialga and Palkia returned to their domains, the rhythm of time and the shape of space, settling back into a harmony they had briefly lost. Giratina, that ancient shadow, retreated to the distorted world of Turnback Cave, its role in the drama complete. The immediate danger had passed. For the people of Hisui, the world did not end. It quieted, and in that profound quiet, a slow, intentional transformation began. The Galaxy team had arrived as explorers, their vessels cutting through the waves to a dangerous frontier. But a crisis of this magnitude reshaped the very fabric of their society. It united the Diamond Clan, the Pearl Clan, and the newcomers in a shared experience that transcended their old disagreements. The traveller from the sky, bearing the blessing of Arceus, had stood between the pillars of creation and commanded their respect. The bonds forged in the face of the divine could not be easily broken. Jubilife Village grew, its importance shifting from a simple outpost in a hostile environment to the heart of a fledgling civilization. Trade routes were carefully established across the vast expanse of the Obsidian Fieldlands and the frozen heights of the Alabaster Icelands. Trust was built, stone by stone, conversation by conversation. The land itself seemed to breathe easier. The fog of winter appeared to lift just a little, as if the world accepted the new balance. Pokémon grew less guarded, more willing to share their space. Hisui was no longer merely a frontier, it was becoming a home. It was becoming a region. Both clans carried a deep, personal reverence for the being they called Almighty Sinnoh. For generations, this reverence had been a point of quiet divergence. The Diamond Clan saw Sinnoh in the steady, unyielding tick of time, the flow of ages. The Pearl Clan saw Sinnoh in the vast, encompassing breadth of space, the room for all life. They were certain of their truths, and this certainty had kept them separate. But the crisis had shown them something essential. They had witnessed the power of time and space in their purest form, and they had seen that neither held supremacy over the other. They were partners, two halves of a single reality. This shared experience, this shared witness of the divine, offered a powerful path toward reconciliation. It proved that their faith was not wrong, but merely incomplete on its own. To honor the master of time was not to deny the master of space. The land needed both forces to exist. The people needed both clans to flourish. It was an understanding that opened a door which had long been closed, not as a political necessity, but as a spiritual truth. As the clans moved forward together, they sought a symbol for this new unity. Nothing embodied the mystery and majesty of the land. Quite like the name of the deity itself, Hisui was the name of the frontier, a word given to the early settlers. The region needed a name that reflected its deep soul, its sacred connection to the very forces that had shaped the Pokémon world. And so, in a decision that was as emotional as it was profound, the land was renamed. No longer would it be called Hisui, it would be called Sinnoh, in honor of the Almighty that both clans held sacred. This decision was a masterful compromise, a single word, carefully chosen to hold the weight of an entire world of belief. For the Diamond Clan, the name Sinnoh still meant the endless progression of time, the lineage of life. For the Pearl Clan, it still meant the infinite canvas of space, the vastness of the sea and sky. The name preserved the entirety of their faith. A believer could hear the word Sinnoh and feel the truth of their own teachings. free from the burden of contradiction. It was a name that permitted coexistence. But in this beautiful resolution, something was carefully set aside. The name Sinnoh perfectly honoured the two great beings of myth, but it did not require the people to speak of the one who created them. It did not require them to untangle the origin of Arceus, the being born from an egg in a void of nothing. It did not force a discussion of the third being, cast into a world of shadow. The name allowed the people to stop asking certain difficult questions. It was a gentle collective agreement to let the deeper complexity of the past rest. The full truth, the intricate machinery of creation, the astronomical lineage of the legendary Pokémon was not erased. The Temple of Sinnoh, built high on Mount Coronet, still told the story of the ancient hero and his 10 companions. The ruins of the Celestica people still whispered their secrets to the wind, but the people did not need to untangle that genealogy to live in peace. The name became a blanket, warm and comfortable, that wrapped the sprawling contradictions and difficult truths of history into a single, harmonious word. Peace required a shared faith, and that faith was spoken of as Almighty Sinnoh. The Temple of Sinnoh stood on the peak, its pillars reaching toward the pure sky. It was a place of memory, not of active worship. The rituals of the clans grew quieter, simpler. The world of myth began its slow, graceful retreat into the background hum of everyday life. As the years passed, the name Hisui was spoken less and less, reserved for old maps and the cherished stories of the eldest villagers. Sinnoh became the word for everything: the sky, the land, the sea, the mountain at the centre of it all. This transformation was not an erasing of history, it was a settling of dust. The villages grew into towns. Jubilife Village became Jubilife City, a bright centre of modern life. The descendants of the Diamond and Pearl clans settled fully into the new region, their ancient allegiances softening into local custom and family history. The great migration of humanity into the region of Sinnoh was complete, but the echoes of the old world did not vanish completely. In one small, quiet settlement at the foot of a mountain, a fragment of the past chose to remain. Celestic Town, perched on the edge of a dark lake, held onto the old knowledge more tightly than anywhere else. The bloodline of the Celestica people quietly endured here. A shrine was carefully maintained. An elderly couple tended to the sacred site. A granddaughter listened, learning the history of her ancestors. The rhythm of this place was different. It was a vessel for the deep memory of the land. The region of Sinnoh had moved on into its bright future, but its oldest truth remained, sleeping just beneath the surface of everyday life, waiting patiently in the calm, deep water of the past for anyone who wished to look closer. From the top of Mount Coronet, the Temple of Sinnoh stood as a monument to what had been achieved. The hero's journey was complete. Arceus had returned to the heavens, or perhaps to the egg from which it first emerged. And the people of Hisui, Diamond and Pearl alike, began the slow work of healing a fractured land. The clans found their common ground, not in conquest, but in gratitude for the world around them. And in that gratitude, they gave the region a new name. They called it Sinnoh, after the deity they both tried so hard to understand. But peace, even hard-won peace, is a fragile thread, and the memory of what came before has a way of settling beneath the surface. If you were to walk the same paths today, through the Sinnoh we know from the modern era, you would find a land shaped by that ancient history. It is a return to modern Sinnoh, where lakes, caves, temples and ruins still carry Hisui's memory. The names have changed. The old outposts have grown into cities. Jubilife Village became Jubilife City, but the bones of the land remain exactly as they were. The 4 great lakes are still there, holding the same deep, still waters. Lake Verity, where the traveller first caught their breath in this new world, still glimmers beneath the open sky. And deep within that lake, Mesprit sleeps, holding the region's motion in its quiet dreams. To the east, Lake Valor stands as a monument to willpower, as ever watchful from the shadows of the water. And in the frozen north, Lake Acuity guards the knowledge of the world. Uxie's domain settled deep beneath the ice. But there is a fourth body of water, far less visited, far less gentle. Send-off Spring. It is a place of quiet endings and, perhaps, impossible beginnings. It leads directly into Turnback Cave, and deep within that twisting dimensional void, Giratina waits. Banished there to the distortion world, the entrance remains in modern Sinnoh, a scar or a doorway in the earth. Giratina's domain is not one of malice anymore, not entirely. It too was created by Arceus, and in the distortion world it presides over antimatter, a necessary balance to Dialga's time and Palkia's space. Farther north, beneath the endless snow of Snowpoint City, the Snowpoint Temple stands sealed. Rigigiga sleeps there, resting after a long duty. The myths say it once dragged the continents themselves into place. In the distant past, it stirred to quell the volcanic rage of Heatran, but now it slumbers, a guardian of the region's deepest foundations. In the heart of this modern region, tucked into a valley between rugged mountains, Celestic Town stands as a fragile surviving connection to the first people of the region. The Celestica people are gone. Their language, their rituals, their great temple on the mountain are all silent. But here in Celestic Town, the memory lingers. The town's elders study the ruins, the murals, the carvings. They preserve the cave paintings that depict the creation of time and space, the birth of the three lakes, and the arrival of the hero. It is a humble place, a living library of a lost world. Volo was born of that bloodline. Kogita was its guardian. And now, the descendants of those original people keep the flame alive, even if they no longer fully understand the fire they tend. And above it all, cutting through the very centre of the region, is Mount Coronet. It towers over every town, every route, every lake. It was the first thing Arceus made, the very spine of the world. The Temple of Sinnoh is gone now, crumbled to ruins, or perhaps transcended into another plane entirely. But the mountain remains. It is the oldest thing in Sinnoh. It was created before the world, before time and space were fully separated into the streams we know. It stands as a silent witness to everything. The birth of Dialga and Palkia, the coming of man, the journey of the hero, the strife of the clans, and the quiet renaming of a land. Snow covers its peak, and the wind howls over its ancient stones. The mountain created before the world, still watching over everything that came after.